Good morning, everybody. My name is Frank McLaughlin. I manage the Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. Glad to have everybody here in Trenton with us face to face, and we have a lot of people remotely, and we were going to try to work with our remote partners in question and answers later, but hopefully they can see and hear everything that's happening today. We have a terrific group of speakers coming today, and some are already here. I'm going to introduce them when it's time for them to speak. First, we have a minor agenda change. Our friends at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, they have a Staff Appreciation Day today, and we greatly appreciate our partners at the federal government. So from brownfields to other programs that are important to work with the state, municipalities, developers in turning around our brownfield sites, but also upgrading infrastructure and doing all the other necessary work that's needed for urban revitalization. I'm hoping our friend Terry Wesley is available remotely. I mean, I'm going to miss his smile. So I'm going to turn this over to Terry Wesley if the technology works. Anthony, Anthony's our magician, or Oz behind the curtain over here. So Terry, take it away.
Good morning, Frank. Can folks hear me?
Our apologies to our friends both here and virtual. We're having some technical difficulties with Terry Wesley's presentation, and we're going to try to get back to Terry as soon as possible. So we're going to get back to our semi-original agenda, at least for the moment, and we are very fortunate to have the Director of our Office of Environmental Justice, Candace Perry, with us today. I have had the pleasure of working with Candace for many years, first in Camden, in the Camden Redevelopment Agency, and then with New Jersey Future. And so Candace brings a lot of local knowledge, planning knowledge, and now environmental justice law knowledge. So we're looking forward to hearing her presentation. Thank Candace. Come on up. And without further ado, here's Candace.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Frank. And thanks for the invitation to be here today. Next slide. Okay, so I've been asked to talk about the environmental justice rule. So let me start with a little bit of background for those of you who may be unfamiliar. So our environmental justice law was signed by Governor Murphy in 2020, and we call it the landmark law within New Jersey. It is the first of its kind in the country. So I believe that other states have environmental justice laws. They don't do exactly what New Jersey does in giving us the authority to direct the placement or condition facilities, which I'll talk about in a minute. New York's does that, and theirs was just signed, I think, maybe a few months ago. So ours is the first. And we're really excited about that. And I just want to say before I start that, it is a privilege to be before you and to be before anybody to share our approach to cumulative impacts and environmental justice, especially through this law, because I stand on the shoulders of all of those who have come before me who made this happen. So specifically and especially New Jersey's environmental justice advocates who have fought for this law for years and years and years and years, and have really produced a concept and used their finesse to really get this through toward the finish lines. We really appreciate them. Also, all of my colleagues within the department are lawyers, are permit reviewers, and are GIS and data people. All of those skill sets that I do not have that have helped to really get us to the place that we are so that I can be able to be the spokesperson to share how our law and our rules work. So thanks to all of those folks, and especially to the commissioner and deputy commissioner for their vision and leadership. So the environmental justice law was signed in 2020. Our rules that implement the law were adopted back in April of this year, specifically April 17th. So I'm going to walk you through how the rules work. But first, next slide. Just want to start with grounding ourselves in the legislative intent behind the regulations. So what did the legislature ask for us to do? And we feel really confident that we met the spirit and the intent of the law. So I don't have time to go through all of these declarations, but this is like page 1 in the law, and it's so, so, so important because other states do not have this authority that we have to really further the promise of environmental justice through our permitting. And these declarations really just give the direction that we are charged to do and really make clear that some of our communities, especially our overburdened communities, our Black and brown and low-income communities, I'll talk about that definition in a minute, really have suffered for far too long, and that it is, next slide, that they have suffered for far too long, and that it is well beyond time for us to act and act specifically in this way. There are a number of ways that I don't have time to get into today about how the Office of Environmental Justice is furthering EJ beyond the environmental justice law. This is not all of our tools, just one very important tool that shifts the paradigm of how we do environmental law. It's unfortunate that this is not the way that we do environmental law, that our laws set by the federal government, right, do not require and ask us, are certain communities experiencing too much pollution already? And if so, might we consider that before we make a decision? That's essentially what the law asks us to do. So let's get into it. Next slide. And next slide again. Okay, so there is a goal of our law, and it is to avoid disproportionate impact. So what do we mean by that? Disproportionate impact can mean two things. So it can mean either a facility is creating adverse cumulative stressors. I'll get into some of these definitions in a minute, but either a facility is creating adverse cumulative stressors. So by the nature of that facility's operation, they're going to cause more pollution in a certain community than what is compared to that community's neighbors. Or a disproportionate impact is found when a community is already experiencing more pollution than their neighbors. So there's already pollution there, or if a facility moves there, it's going to cause there to be an overabundance of pollution. And so our goal is to avoid that disproportionate impact. And when we cannot avoid, our goal is to minimize and mitigate. Talk about that in a minute, but next slide. Okay, so the first step to kind of understanding how the rules work is to understand where and how the law and the rules are applicable. So there's kind of 3 steps to determining applicability. First is the project proposing to be located in or is already located in an overburdened community? I'll explain that definition in a minute. The second is that the project or the facility has to be defined by the environmental justice law. So there's 8 types of facilities, or you can think of 8 industries for which the law would be implicated. So we're talking about major sources of air pollution like power plants. We're talking about incinerators, resource recovery facilities, sewage treatment plants, transfer stations or solid waste facilities, recycling facilities, scrap metal facilities, landfills, or medical waste incinerators. So those types of industries are implicated by the law. And then the third is that facility, one of those 8, that is proposing to be located in or is already located in an OBC that is requesting a specific permit or an applicable permit as defined by the law. So we're talking about land use, solid waste, recycling, water supply, and pollution and air pollution permits. So only in that scope is the law triggered. So let me just say a point about brownfields and brownfield applicability. So the EJ law would only be, or brownfield redevelopment would only be subject to the EJ law if a brownfield is being redeveloped to put one of these 8 types of facilities on that brownfield. So the law is not meant to restrict or limit in any way brownfield redevelopment. Like, that's a good thing. We want to get brownfields redeveloped for beneficial use within our overburdened communities. It is only when one of these 8 are being placed or proposed to be placed on the brownfield, which is when the law is triggered. So next slide. Okay, so back to our definition of an overburdened community. So it is based on demographics. So at least 35% of households qualify as low income, or at least 45% of residents identify as minority or a member of a tribal community, or at least 40% of the households have limited English proficiency. So the emphasis here is on the word or. You need not meet all 3 of those criteria in order to be defined as an overburdened community. Just one will suffice, and that is intentional to make sure that we are comprehensively looking at all places within the state. So it is not just the fact that you are a low-income community. You can be a Black and wealthy community and still be discriminated against on the basis of race. And so that or is very important. Our overburdened communities exist within 338 of our state's 564 municipalities. So about 50% of the state's population live within OBCs. Now, next slide. This is just defined at the demographics. So low income, minority status, your ability to speak English very well or not, right? So how does environmental justice get layered on top of that? So this slide is really important because I want to make a distinction, a very important one, between overburdened communities and what we call an environmental justice community. They're not necessarily interchangeable. So if we think of our overburdened community, that last definition on the last slide that we just talked about, as your circle in blue, as your community of concern. So just basically only based on demographics. And then we layer on the circle in this brownish red, which is the presence of disproportionate environmental and public health stressors. We'll get into that definition. What do we mean by stressors in the next few slides? So, but we're basically talking about pollution, access pollution, overabundance of pollution. And then we layer on top your circle in green, your absence of environmental and public health stressors. So it's not just the fact that some communities are experiencing more pollution, it's also the fact that some communities lack environmental benefits. So we're talking about trees, tree canopy, open space, park space, green stormwater infrastructure, and so on and so forth. So based on race, based on income, based on how well you speak English or not, there also can tend to be a tendency of a lack of these environmental benefits. So all of those coupled together is what makes for an environmental justice community, not just based on their demographics. Okay, next slide. So we have a really cool tool. I hope that some of you have played around with this, or if you haven't, that you will click around in it after today's discussion. We have a really cool tool called EJ Map. So it is our environmental justice mapping, assessment, and protection tool. And so this is where you can see all of the state's environmental justice communities, overburdened communities, mapped out and color-coded. And so this is what the tool looks like when you arrive on the screen. Just have a couple of screenshots because I don't have the time to do a demo for you. But next slide. There are 4 tabs along the top. So that first intro slide, you can get a lot of the introduction that I'm covering in this talk today about the environmental justice law, the rules, all the definitions, how it works. On the second tab is where you can see overburdened communities. And so again, we're plotting out all of those communities which are defined at the block group level. So that is the smallest geographic unit that the U.S. Census provides data for. So again, we want to look at the smallest community and make sure that we're providing protections and considering them in our decision making and our permitting and our decision making at the lowest level to make sure that we are providing the most comprehensive amount of protections. So what you're seeing on this map and in the legend is 2 color coding here. One is for OBC, which is the color in the tealish green color. And then you have adjacent. So just want to spend a moment to talk about adjacent really quick in this kind of marigold color. So adjacent means block groups defined by the census that have zero population. So an example is a port. You know, port typically will be a block group that has zero population. No one lives at the port, right? But there could be facilities that are proposing to be locating and moving into the port. Let's say a power plant. Let's say a scrap metal facility, or or so on and so forth, right? So in order to provide the protections that the environmental justice law is intended to provide, we also want to look at the adjacent block groups. So those zero population communities that are located immediately adjacent to an overburdened community, because the impacts of pollution that that facility might contribute might trickle over into the immediately adjacent block group. So we also are plotting those, and those adjacent block groups could also be subject to the environmental justice law. Next slide. So I've zoomed in a bit further on this screenshot. Right here, I've just put in this building that we're in today, DEP's headquarters, and you can see that it is within an overburdened community. Based on the legend here, it is because of low income and minority status. So you can see and just kind of drill down a bit further the specific combinations, permutations of OBC criteria, just by searching, just like Google Maps, any address, any location, county, municipality, you can see all of those color-coded block groups. Next slide. Okay, so the third tab up at the top of the screen is facilities. So here you can see all of the potentially applicable facilities as defined by the environmental justice law plotted on this map. So all of your sources of major air pollution, all of your recycling and incinerator and scrapyard facilities, all of those are located here, coded by a different icon. And so if you type in your address, you're able to see what types of facilities and sites may be near where you live, to see whether those facilities may be subject to the environmental justice law. One really cool thing that we're working on is making a status update be available. So not only can you just see where these facilities are, but you can click on it and you can see where they are through the environmental justice process. So stay tuned for that in a future update. Next slide. And then lastly, the fourth tab, the stressor summary tab, is really the meat of this tool. And so this is where we get into where environmental justice communities are located. So we have two color codings here, dark blue, which says higher than the 50th percentile, and then a lighter blue, which is not higher than the 50th percentile. So the environmental justice law asks us to consider whether or not a total count of stressors within one overburdened community is higher than the 50th percentile or the median of that community's neighbors. And we define neighbors by a geographic point of comparison. So we mean either the county or the state. So we're going to look at the total count of stressors in the OBC compared to the total count of stressors either in the county or the state, whichever is lower. If it's higher than, then we're saying that's an EJ community. That community has a disproportionate amount of pollution as compared to either the county or the state, whichever is lower. And therefore, this community is subject to disproportionate amounts of pollution. And so we need to do something about it through the EJ process. Next slide. So let's talk about environmental and public health stressors. What do we mean by that? So we have 5 categories. So we're looking at concentrated areas of air pollution, mobile sources of air pollution, contaminated sites, transfer stations, and then, point sources of water pollution. So we're talking about actual pollution, water and air pollution, and also we are counting the facilities themselves as stressors. So just the inherent nature that you're located next to a facility is a stressor. And then we also have or conditions that may cause potential public health impacts, including asthma, cancer, elevated blood lead levels, and so on and so forth. And so the point there is that we're looking at the social determinants of health. We are not including as a stressor asthma and cancer itself. So public health data is very hard to access, and it's hard to access at the scale that we need at the block group level. So we get into HIPAA considerations. A lot of the data is at a larger scale, not at the block group scale, which is hard to plot, which is hard to obtain and then plot in our map. So we're using proxies. You'll see that in the next couple of slides to get at that public health data without having to include the public health data itself, which is difficult. Next slide. All right, so we have 26 stressors. We stakeholdered this, I think, from a list of like, I don't know, 60 or 70 and kind of whittled it down to 26. What's really important here through the environmental justice law is that we are producing a set of regulations that are legally defensible. We already have a challenge to our regulations. And so in order to do that, we need to include data sources that are publicly accessible, publicly available, and replicable. So, for example, warehouses is not included in one of our stressors because we do not have a publicly accessible, reliable data source for where warehouses are located throughout our state. Next slide. So we'll go through this pretty quick. Just want to include this for you so you can see the types of stressors that we're talking about. So ozone and particulate matter. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so mobile sources of air pollution. So we're talking about truck traffic is a stressor. Next slide. Point sources of water pollution like combined sewer overflows. Next slide. Solid waste and scrap yards. Next slide. Contaminated sites. Next slide. And then again, those things that may cause public health impact. So poor drinking water may cause a public health impact. Or your exposure to lead may cause a public health impact. So we're looking at the age of housing stock here because we know that houses built before a certain time may have lead, which may cause lead exposure. Next slide. And then lack of tree canopy and impervious cover. And then next slide. You know, the social determinants, unemployment and education we also include. So those are our 26. Next slide. All right, so step 2. We talked about some definitions and stuff. Let's get into what we are requiring of applicants. So 2 things. First, we are requiring an environmental justice impact statement, which is first of its kind type of requirement. We've never done that before. So applicants have to produce a document that they make public, they present in front of the community, and they submit to us, the department, that outlines a couple of different things. So we're looking at the potential for the facility to cause environmental and public health impacts, the environmental and public health impacts that are already borne by the community, and which impacts can't the facility avoid, and what is their proposal to avoid them or minimize them. That's essentially what the environmental justice impact statement must do. And so they produce that, they submit it to us, we review it, and we give them the green light to make it public and to proceed, and for them to proceed with the next step of having an environmental justice hearing, so public hearing. So we're requiring for the applicant to meet directly with the host overburdened community to explain to them, to defend to them, to present to them why they want to be located within their community and what their operations will entail. So they will present that aegis, is what we call it, the impact statement. Next slide. And so after that, we make a decision. We will take into consideration all of the testimony, all of the comments from the public, and that coupled together with what is proposed within the aegis, that impact statement, we have a decision to make. So the law authorizes us to do a couple of different things. So 1, our goal, right, is to avoid a disproportionate impact. So if a facility can avoid a disproportionate impact, then we will authorize them to proceed. You've avoided the impact, go ahead. We will set necessary conditions to ensure that there is not a future case of disproportionate impact. Where a facility cannot avoid a disproportionate impact, we have 2 options. So for new facilities, we are authorized to deny that permit. You can't avoid it, you must deny it. For existing facilities or expanded facilities or facilities that are requesting a renewal to one of those applicable permits, we are not authorized to deny that permit, but we must set conditions on those permits. So what do we mean by conditions? So we mean, conditioning the applicant through the permit to recirculate traffic around truck traffic around the overburdened community and not through the community, to require them to have a noise or a dust mitigation plan or odor mitigation plan, to require them to transition to renewable energy for their truck fleet by a certain time, or to require that they add emissions control technologies to reduce emissions. So some things like that, just throwing that off the top of my head, but those conditions that we will set and require on the permit. And so next slide, that's pretty much how the EJ rules work. I have included a number of links that are on our EJ website. There's FAQs, there's training videos. This presentation is also linked on there. There's a glossary. There's public hearing best practices, all kinds of stuff. So I encourage you to look at that for more information. So thanks for your time.
Does anybody have questions for Candace? Either from our live audience, Jeff Dye is got 2 hands up. So Candace, maybe you start with Jeff.
Okay.
I don't want to wait 10 minutes. We'll have to.
Hi, Candace. Thanks for coming in. Have you had any applications come in so far?
I think we may have one so far.
Okay. So just getting the process going.
Yeah, we're just getting it going. Our rules just got adopted April 17th. So we're working out how to implement. And I think no one wants to be the first. So when they come in, they'll start coming in. But maybe we have one so far. Yeah. Yeah.
I need a suggestion to Frank, the mapping
Yeah.
they have. You might want to consider Rafael Rivera about importing that to GeoWeb.
Who's that?
Rafael Rivera, he works in the department.
Okay.
Frank can track him down for you. It's one of the tools that us LSRPs will look at when we're looking at sites. And it's certainly something that I think would also help developers, because that's kind of one of the first tools you'll look at to track the environmental history, permits, presence of pollution at a site. And if you have another layer you can overlay, that might help.
Yeah, it may already be there. I know a number of our tools throughout the department, we've been layering on that OBC layer. So it may be there, and if not, it is just an oversight. Should be.
We can check into that, Candace, and get back to Bill. Do we have any virtual questions for Candace? Oh, did you have a question, ma'am?
Thank you so much for your presentation. It was very helpful.
Can I give you the microphone? Just and introduce yourself too when you ask Candace a question.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Paula Rogove, and I live in Teaneck, New Jersey. I'm with Don't Gas the Meadowlands Coalition. I'm concerned about the power plant that's proposed in Woodbridge, because there is an existing power plant in an environmental justice community. It's had violations, and I'm just wondering, how can they even dare to apply for a second power plant when they're not meeting the air quality rules that are required? Why? How can they even dare to apply for it? And I know that the application came before the EJ law was in place, fully in place. So, is there any way that the spirit of the EJ law can be applied to protect the community that's truly overburdened?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so before Paula's referring to, before our environmental justice regulations were adopted April 17th, the commissioner did sign an administrative order, which does intend to meet the spirit and the intent of the law before the laws were fully in place and effective. And so that administrative order requires applicants to do a public process. So they have to meet within the host community, have a public hearing, listen to all the comments and testimony, and we review those and we consider it when making our final decision on the permit, which is pending before the department. So we can't fully implement the environmental justice regulations legally before they are effective, but we can listen to the community, review all the comments, and consider setting conditions within our existing, before the rule, within our existing regulatory authority to do something with the permit.
Have those hearings happened yet?
Yeah, they've happened.
Because the other night at the or last week at the environmental justice hearing, people from
So
the community were not allowed to speak.
That wasn't a CPB hearing. That was an environmental justice community engagement session. So our commissioner and I are touring around the state, listening to our overburdened communities to hear from them. And so Middlesex County just happened to be the next stop on our tour. And so that was not a CPB public hearing. The public process for CPB concluded on April 30th.
Hello.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks, Candace.
Yeah, it's another question. Thank you for the great presentation. I know I walked in late, but I was listening remotely, and I learned quite a bit, so thank you.
Introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah, sure. Name is Charlie Cradaville. I'm with Food and Water Watch, Food and Water Action, and also concerned about the proposal for another gas plant on a brownfield development area in Caseby. And I guess I wanted you to speak to the requirements for an environmental justice impact statement, or I guess you call it EJIS. How important is that, and why wasn't that required in the Caseby case? Because I would imagine that would reveal a lot of bad impacts for the community. So, the commissioner at this meeting seemed to suggest that there was one done. And, I followed up with you and you confirmed that there's not going to be one done because they're not applying the law to this company. Why not? And why can't they be required to produce an EGIS so that we can see the impact?
Yeah, so the facility is subject to the environmental justice law. The regulations were not adopted until April 17th. We received the application before April 17th. The regulations require an EGIS. We cannot require an EGIS before the regulations were adopted and effective April 17th. So it is subject to the law, which is why it is going through and has gone through the administrative order process.
Critically missing that EGIS. No, they're not going to have to do it.
That's correct, because the EGIS is a requirement of the regulations, which were adopted and effective on April 17th, and our application was received before April 17th.
Well, what can we do to get a better outcome here? Because I think, the goals you're speaking of are noble and good, and we must achieve them right away, ASAP. What can those of us that don't want to see another gas power plant in Caseby do?
Yeah, I think by the time a lot of permits get to us for the department, it has already gone through in the local government or through the county government for siting and approval through planning board, zoning board, city council. And so our duty when an application gets to us is to follow the law, follow the science, which directs us to determine whether or not a facility would cause a disproportionate impact or disproportionate amount of pollution based on discrimination, based on income discrimination, based on racism. And if so, we follow the law, which tells us what to do. But that's after the fact of how it's been through the county, the local, different types of approvals. And so I would encourage residents to get involved at the local level. The state approvals is in many cases reactive to decisions that have already happened. And so we have a finite ability to move within that box. There are multiple, and then after the state, it goes to the federal government in many cases for approval. And so there's multiple avenues to lift your voices. Would definitely encourage folks to start at the local level.
Thank you.
Do we have any
We do have one question from Joe Hawkrider, who represents the Perth Amboy BDA. How is the Burn State Forest qualifying as an OBC?
Okay, so I'm not completely familiar with that block group, but if it meets the definition of low income, minority, or limited English proficiency, it would qualify. So,
Thank you.
Hi there, my name is Pranita Bijlani. I'm from Rahway, and I wanted to thank you so much for such an informative presentation. I was just wondering, I know the executive order was in place after the EJ law was passed, but waiting for the rules to be ironed out. And I know the executive order talks a lot about maximizing public involvement. And I know that CPV only conducted one public hearing on February 28th, and that was a remote hearing that was not within the community. And I was just wondering, like, if that really matches the spirit of the executive order and the EJ law. I mean, talking specifically about this proposed CPV 2. Because I know many of us have been talking to residents in KSB and in Fords, and most of them didn't even know about this plant, and many of them do suffer from, asthma and pretty serious respiratory illnesses, even young children who are on nebulizers and multiple inhalers. So there's just a huge concern within those communities, and it's just heartbreaking, like that they didn't really have an opportunity to participate. Very few people even knew about it. So I just was wondering why there weren't additional public hearings within the communities that were most directly going to be affected.
yeah, I want to acknowledge and concede. I think many of my colleagues within the department would concede to the fact that many of the hearings that have happened under the administrative order could have been better. So that's a fact, and that's reality. What's also a fact and what's also reality is that our regulations that require a hearing were not in place. So we did not have the teeth at the time to make a facility do a process for which we did not have regulations to make them do. Under the regulations, let me tell you what's going to happen, and what has been happening is there are more robust requirements than you see in the administrative order. So for example, the regulations require that an applicant holds a hybrid meeting. So it can't just be online. It has to be within the host overburdened community. You have to provide multiple options for people to attend. And so that is a requirement, which is a really good thing. But there's ways for applicants to go above and beyond that. So the Office of Environmental Justice is working on a set of meaningful public participation guidelines that really outline the vision, the department's vision for the best way, the most successful way to have a meeting. We think that in order to require applicants to do that, we need to show them how. And so we're working on that. Now that's guidance. It is not going to be things that are required because our regulations have already been adopted and are effective and are final. So for example, we've heard a lot of comments in our public comment process about the things the DEP should be requiring. Some of them are not feasible. So for example, a comment that we got a number of times is that in the regulations, there should be a list of all the community organizations within the state that applicants should be required to reach out to notify the public about when a hearing is happening. I can't write into a set of regulations, you must notify ABC organization. What if ABC organization dissolves? What if they no longer exist, right? But there are different opportunities that my office is working on to ensure that the word gets out through guidance. Things that we could not regulate, but things that we can offer. And we hope that our applicants will read, pick up, and we hope that our community members will compel them to read and pick up our guidance and to really utilize it. So stay tuned for that.
I just wanted to also add as a follow-up.
I'm sorry, we're going to have to move on. I'm going to be around for questions, and I work very closely with Candace, so we will, and we'll invite Candace back maybe next quarter,
Sure.
if that's okay.
I had a follow-up just about like.
I'm going.
Oh, so sorry.
We'll have to work. You can email us, or and I'll be around later to answer questions. Thanks, Candace. Thank you so much. Give Candace a round of applause. Thank you. We're going to have a 5-minute break right now, unfortunately, because we're having technical difficulty. We expect to get Terry Wesley on in 5 minutes. So if everybody can be back is that 10:25, Rachel? I don't know. So we're going to restart at 10:25 with Terry Wesley just for a few minutes, and then we're going to get to our friend Bill Call after that. Thank you for your patience with us. We are going to restart because we have our colleagues at EPA ready to give their update now. So again, we apologize for the technical difficulties we've been experiencing this morning, but we are going to start because I see my friend Shanine Mitchell all ready to speak. So I'm going to get out of the way so she can start her presentation and provide the EPA update. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Good morning, everyone. I'm talking from our lovely facility in Edison. So there's about 250 EPA staffers roaming around the area. So forgive me if we have any interruptions. But Terry had to leave because he's on his way to Edison right now. So I'm going to be giving you our EPA updates. So this will bear with me 1 second. Let me just get his notes. And I believe that Rachel has included it in the webinar. So you'll have it for your reference, and there's also links to all the information that I'll be discussing. So we're going to start first and foremost with our big event that's coming up in August. It's in Detroit, Michigan, and it's our Brownfield's 2023 National Training Conference. It's a great event where we bring together a variety of different stakeholders from government, from communities, from educational fields, and basically all of these practitioners come together and they get to have a good understanding of our Brownfields program, some of the best practices, in particular for assessment, remediation, redevelopment of contaminated properties. So really great workshops, networking events. We'll be hosting a booth at the conference. We'll also have our regional open house. And I believe that we have a couple panelists from the region, so we ask you to please come to our conference, support our panelists, get to hear all of those really good case studies that are out there. So if you're planning on attending the Brownfields Training Conference, we have provided the link. We highly encourage you to register. If you are a grantee, you should have travel funds available. If not, work with your project officer to see if you can get funds redistributed so that you can travel to the Brownfields Conference. Unfortunately, all the scholarships are closed at this point, but still there's an opportunity. So please, we're expecting at least 5,000 or more attendees. We had about 5,000 attendees last year when we had the conference in Oklahoma City. So really looking forward to seeing everyone present at the conference. And the next conference will probably take place in 2 years. So yeah, please, if you can, try and come out for our conference. I believe our state partners will also be present at the conference as well. I think, Frank, you're doing a panel, if my memory serves me correctly, but really good stuff. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about is our FY24 EPA Brownfields Job Training Grant. The solicitation is currently open. It closes on August 2nd. These funds are designed for you to recruit, place, and train individuals that are impacted by brownfields to receive sustainable employment. We're looking at getting people that are in these EJ communities that that we've been working with, getting them sustainable employment, giving them pathways out of poverty so they can feed their families. It's a really good program that we have that's under the umbrella of our Brownfields program. We have a really good success rate within the region. We have about a 74% placement rate, and nationwide we have a 72% placement rate with our program. So we encourage any eligible entities, which include state, municipalities, universities, nonprofits, to come out and apply for the job training grants. So the next thing that we have, or Terry has on his list, is the announcement of the new grant. So we were able to award $350 million through cleanup and technical assistance and assessment grants. So we're really excited about that. That came out May 25th, 2023. So we want to say a big congratulations to Camden, New Jersey, Trenton, and NJIT TAB, who is going to be our current TAB recipient for the next 5 years. So we're looking forward to working with them as a partner, and we encourage you also, if you are seeking technical assistance and guidance, to reach out to NJIT as well, and we can provide you with links to their contact information. So finally, the last thing that we wanted to mention is the Brownfield's definition under the Energy Committee's tax credit bonus. And so the IRS just recently released some FAQs on determining the Brownfield status for the purpose of energy community tax credit bonuses. So that information can be found on their website. We have the link included in the attachment that Rachel's been will send out, and then our Office of Brownfields and Land Revitalization will host a web link to these FAQs. And then if you have any questions, you can reach out to our Regional Brownfields Program or to OBLR, and we can get you that contact information. But EPA will not be involved in making brownfield designations for tax credit purposes. So you will have to probably go to the IRS for that information. And as I mentioned, we can get you access to those frequently asked questions and get you context that could provide you with more details. And I think that's about it, short and sweet.
Thanks, Shanine. Do we have any questions from our virtual or our live audience? No questions virtually? Any questions from our audience? Well, Shanine, thank you so much. It is Employee Appreciation Day at EPA, and we appreciate you every day, Shanine and Terry and the staff at EPA Brownfields Group. Thank you so much.
And we appreciate you, Frank, and all of your team at NJDP. So looking forward to working with you.
Thanks, Shanine. So we're going to get back to our semi-agenda here. Our next speaker is currently the Executive Director of the Licensed Site Remediation Professional Association. President. Janice is, forgive me, Janice, and forgive me, Bill. Well, I was trying to give you a promotion, Bill. Bill also works at the Penn Jersey environmental consulting firm that we've done a lot of work with, our Office of Brownfield and Community Revitalization. Bill works for Roger Ferguson, who was a former also president at LSRPA, and I think Roger thinks I work for him sometimes too, Bill. So without any further action, and tell Roger I said hi. Bill Call, LSRPA, and Penn Jersey Environmental.
All right, now we're back in business. As Frank mentioned, my name is William Call. I've been an LSRP since the inception of the program. I've been practicing since 1987, so about roughly 36 years in the field. I'm a geologist, trained at Rensselaer up in Troy, New York. So you talk about redevelopment opportunities. If you're in New York, that's a good place to start. I'm here today to talk about both the LSRP Association, as well as some of the details of what we do and how we interact with the state and redevelopers and redeveloping agencies. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide. Okay, excuse me, I've got a cheat sheet in front of me. The New Jersey Licensed Site Remediation Professional Program is a nonprofit C6 entity in New Jersey. We are the premier advocate trade association for LSRPs in the state. We also do a lot of work with training our own professionals or colleagues. So we conduct a lot of educational programs for continuing ed, which we need quite a bit of credits every 3-year cycle. We also act as a technical resource. So if folks have questions, we have a sounding board for our members, that type of thing. We assist our membership in developing the standard of care for the licensed site remediation professionals, as well as enhancing the use of independent professional judgment as allowed by the Site Remediation Reform Act, which came out in 08, 09, which brought to fruition our profession as a brand new profession. In the old days, we had case managers, as some of you recall. That system has been semi-privatized with a very stringent code of conduct and, dare I say, a licensing board that very closely watches everything we do. Our highest charge per our code of conduct, item 16A, is protection. Our highest charge is protection of public health, safety, and the environment. Now I know that some folks don't believe that, but believe me, we're worried about getting licensing board smacked by the licensing board and litigation from our clients or third parties. There's an expectation of third party reliance on our work. So we have to be very cautious, what we do, and very careful. Our association has about 900 members. Those include, I want to say, roughly 550 of the 740 some odd LSRPs in the state. So we can get to messages out to most of them, not all of them. Some folks just elected not to be involved for whatever reason. Next slide, please. The LSRPA, we are leading contributors to the legislative process and stakeholder process. We work with the DEP frequently. As Frank and I were talking before my session, we also meet with the assistant commissioner and directors at director level folks at DEP, providing our input on commenting on draft rules, guidance, and again, advancing the concept of independent professional judgment. Now, for those of you who don't know what that means, it's basically the LSRP calls the ball on the site, but we have to obviously take in information from a lot of sources, whether it's DEP, the public, past history of the site, that type of thing. Again, we interact regularly with the DEP, both mid-level folks reviewing our documents, our key document submittals, as well as the licensing board. The licensing board, again, if they get a complaint, and any citizen can lodge a complaint, it doesn't have to be a regulator or another LSRP, if the practice is not being followed. Again, mutual goal is protection of public health, safety, and the environment. Next slide, please. Okay, first question, how do you find an LSRP? Well, there's a couple of links, which I'm sure will be distributed in the slides. They're kind of ugly URLs, apologies, but that's what they are. The DEP has a list of every LSRP. You can go into DEP Data Miner. You can look up their history. You can go to the licensing board of all their submittals and all their projects. All 75 some odd of my sites are still listed, going back to 09. You can also go to the licensing board website, and you can pull down not only a guide how to hire an LSRP, but you can review the enforcement actions against LSRPs. So if you're looking to hire one, or if your neighbor that's concerned or an impacted property holder, you can certainly look that information up. The licensing board has a guide posted on how to hire an LSRP, and it's really the contracting, the expectations, proposals, managing their work, that type of thing. But if you're looking to hire an LSRP, that's a pretty good resource to start. The LSRPA also would assist. I know our Sue Boyle, our past executive director, would get 1 or 2 phone calls or emails a month asking LSRP related questions. So that we are also a resource. We've got about 400 of the LSRPs listed on our website as well. That probably should change to a link to the data miner because it takes a little effort to maintain that. All right, next slide, please. All right, the process. This is where an LSRP will get involved and kind of the steps they will take, or a redeveloper or municipality would take. Yes, that is a picture of one of my sites in Perth Amboy, the new high school. First step, and this usually is at a municipal, maybe county level, inventory, identify the sites. I do recommend using NJ GeoWeb to look at your sites and review the environmental history. There's various layers: known contaminated site list, historic fill. Joe Stefanino just added the U.S. Department of Agriculture web soil survey, so you can look for urban land, another indicator of potential historic fill. And I want to take a step back because a lot of what we're talking about here is redevelopment in urban areas, and 9 times out of 10 you're going to find historic fill. And that's polyaromatic hydrocarbons, metals, sometimes PCBs, sometimes petroleum, usually bad material to build on anyway. But if you're looking to build in any urban area in the country, the world actually, it's historic fill. And what historic fill is, layers of civilization, I call it. Over hundreds of years of industrialization and human occupancy, buildings getting burned down, dirt being imported to a site, fire, demolition. Eventually you get layers of crud in the soil, and it's there and no one ever looks at it, and everyone likes to buy a site like a used car and buy it on its color or its visual appearance. I recommend you think of these sites as used cars. Get your mechanic, your LSRP, to look under the hood before you dive in and spend a lot of money. Obviously, you need to identify funding, bonds, private investments. I just threw a few here that came to memory. The Brownfields grants, HDSRF, and I hear at the last SHRAG meeting, I think BDAs are coming back. Frank, I don't know who's talking about that, but I saw it on the agenda, which is a good resource to help in the process. The next step typically is project design, where the redeveloper entity will hire their engineers and architects and their project team. Suggestion: get your LSRPs involved then. Don't wait till the. I had someone in Montclair just pull me in the 11th hour and something. I was just all day yesterday, playing whack-a-mole with the contractor and the architect. Get us involved early. The LSRP will properly advise you what the requirements are and what you need to look for. Next step is preliminary assessment. That's the historical research. You're doing Oprah searches to federal, state, county, local agencies. The LSRP has to go to the site. That's required. Look for what we call areas of concern, or AOCs, and those could be tanks, drum storage areas, historic fill. If historic fill is identified, the LSRP is obligated to take a look at it, not just dismiss it. The next step is a site investigation, where you're going to look at these targeted areas of concern and start sampling. That could be soil or usually soil first, then groundwater. The PASI process is also covered under due diligence. So if you're an acquiring entity, please do your PASI before the condemnation, tax foreclosures, purchase. I can't tell you how many stories I've been told where about Board of Ed bought a piece of property from the town for $1. Okay, why are you selling it to us for $1? What's wrong with it? The LSRP's got to be in there checking. Trust but verify. Then comes a remedial investigation, where if you find any contamination in those areas, you try and draw a line around it. How big, how wide, how deep is the volume of material you're dealing with? That can include extensive soil and groundwater sampling. That is typically done after site acquisition. Depending on what's found, a remedial action work plan is developed, which is submitted to the state. You don't have to approve it. In some cases, they have to approve them, not all. I could have a class on all these key documents. That governs the work that you will do as far as excavating, capping, etc. Next step is the remedial action and the permitting process, and we're going through a little angst right now because a lot of remedial action permits are being hung up at the DEP, no disrespect intended. But that's really because the department, rather than reviewing 10% of the documents in each of these steps along the way, when they start doing the permit, they start cracking the books on very old reports. And it's driving LSRPs nuts and redevelopers nuts because it can take you 500-600 days to get a permit, which we've been meeting with David Hames and Gwen Servas on that, and fortunately they're very receptive. They now have a remediation process improvement initiative, or PII, to help address some of these backlogs. They're going to try, there's a universe of about 5 categories of sites, maybe 6. They're going to try and get those permitting, the easier permits, the low-hanging fruit, try and get those resolved quicker. The last step is a response action outcome, or RAO. That replaces the old no further action letter, which existed pre-LSRP. Make sure your fees are paid. LSRPs are obligated to check that, but if you're a municipality, county, redevelopment type agency, just make sure any past due fees are paid. Otherwise, the RAO cannot be issued. Obviously, last step is your redevelopment construction process. Next slide, please. Okay, and again, these just popped into my head as I was pulling up the developing my slides. These are just some examples. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. I've got a bit of a municipal board of ed, school district bent because that's kind of my bread and butter. So that's what I'm most familiar with. So we're doing public works, support maintenance facilities, gas stations. I remember, I think it was in Keyport, there were a couple of gas stations that got included in a BDA. With that, obviously, you're dealing with underground tanks. So you have gasoline. You may have historical tanks. I remember digging a tank site in Newark, and not only did we have 2 gas tanks, but they were on top of 2 other gas tanks. So your LSRP's really got to dive into the history of the site and address any areas of concern. This next one's near and dear to my heart: schools, childcare. I deal with a lot of public school entities. Right now I have a project, the new high school in Perth Amboy. It's under construction with the SDA, School Development Authority, and they have to acquire sites too, so they can build. They're either an addition or a new school, and there's an ebb and flow to student populations. Hoboken's another district I work with. They had seen an outflow of young parents, parent age folks, and now they're coming back in, so they're building schools. They're trying to find places to build schools. And very often they get desperate and they kind of take, again, a property based on color, on the visual appearance of oh, nice flat site, that's perfect. Not realizing that, there's factories nearby or historic fill on the site. Firing ranges, municipal county firing ranges, fire training facilities. I worked on the Monmouth County firing range, Eatontown, I guess it is. The police personnel, they were practicing so frequently, they were shooting the bullets over the berm, the berm. They didn't have any roofing or no blue sky baffles above them, so the bullets were going in the swamp. Oh, and guess what happens? You get lead, and the lead starts getting through the swamp and the surface water and starts migrating. So it's something to look at. Fire training facilities, now the emerging contaminants of concern we have to be most careful with, beyond the fuel they used in the burn pits to train for fires, is PFOS, PFOS, Gen X type contaminants, which is often in firefighting foam. Recreation areas, parks, former landfills. My firm right now is doing a lot of work with solar facilities on old town dumps. That's beyond the permitting and construction and infrastructure required for that. There's a good deal of details and background we have to go through to see what's put in the dump. So that often entails a very detailed file review, and DEP has files on the dumps that are thousands of pages long. Something to be careful, again, tax foreclosures, eminent domain, Those type of facilities or properties, when you acquire them, please do the PASI first before you acquire the property. Otherwise, you're encumbering your municipality or county agency with a potential time bomb. I can't tell you how many times, like I said, people buy property for $1 and it ends up being a mess. Down in North Brunswick, I don't remember the name of the facility, but they had a school built on an old dump for all the medical refuse, the bottleware, the little bottles of perfume and cold cream and perfume, you know, all these beauty products. Along Route, I think it was 1 or 130, there's all those medical facilities that used to dump in here. The school bought it for $1. The guy's out mowing the lawn one day, and hears clink, clink, clink in his lawnmower. Well, people were there for months, if not years, in level C with the masks and the suits cleaning it up. Linear construction, if there's infrastructure especially, this could be applicable to. Is essentially a very limited kind of blinders on type of LSRP process where they're building a road, putting in a sewer, extending, you know, adding lanes to a highway, that type of thing. The requirements are a little less onerous, and it's really a matter of cleaning up what's when you're in your construction corridor. Obviously, the redevelopment projects, brownfields projects we're talking about now would be another one. Next slide, please. Another tool in the toolbox that I've used fairly successfully a few times, not a lot, but there's an exemption for Spill Act liability. If you're a governmental entity, you're exempt from joint and several liability, determined as your function as a sovereign entity. Again, eminent domain, tax foreclosures, condemnations, those type of things. There's also a checkbox on the form. If the governmental entity acquired the property by any means for the purposes of promoting redevelopment, it will not alleviate the time frames, but will help with your fees. I have a site where the fees used to be $27,000 a year because they had, 50 some odd areas of concern. And I believe they didn't get billed this year, so I believe they're going to get a pass on the annual fees. Next slide, please. So the LSRP is basically, again, I call them we've been deputized. We essentially will proceed generally without DEP direction. On most cases, there is a technical consultation program available in the department if we get into a crunchy site and we need some technical assistance. This allows the remediation or the cleanup of the site to proceed in an expedited or more efficient manner. In the old days with case managers, you'd submit your remedial investigation report, you'd wait 1, 2, 3 years for a response. And obviously that doesn't work if you're doing redevelopment, and there's no surety in the schedule or the even the response you get back from the state after such a long time. So the LSRP will lay out a process with their client, going over the mandatory remediation timeframes and the process. The LSRP conducting the remediation supervises the process without regard to when the remediation was initiated. An LSRP has to be retained for any remediation activities in the state of New Jersey. It's mandatory except for residential heating oil tanks, the UHOT program, which is basically tanks 2,000 gallons or size and less. That could apply to small commercial facilities, churches, homes, that type of thing. Due diligence, again, the PASI process. Matter of fact, there's a lot of attorneys that will write out LSRPs and due diligence because they don't want us calling in a discharge. So we're fighting that. We think LSRP should be retained for any due diligence, but it's a battle. Again, we're responsible for the oversight start to finish. We have to ensure the remediation is protective of public health, safety, and the environment. I keep repeating that, but please be reminded that's our highest charge. So if we're working with a client that's telling us to do something wrong, we fire ourselves from the client, and perhaps as a reporting requirement. So I often liken LSRPs to a doctor treating a patient. We have to cure the patient, and that's really our charge. Next slide, please. So what do? An LSRP has to officially notify the DEP that we've been retained within 15 days of retention. We have to submit an annual reporting form so the DEP can establish fees for the remediating party. That's within 45 days. If there is any investigation, the LSRP with the licensing board of the DEP, we're obligated to cooperate fully. If there's a release basically affecting potable water, vapor intrusion, or acute contact issues, that's called an immediate environmental concern, and that's kind of another universe with its own timelines. That could be, gas vapors in a building, municipal well cluster impacted by a solvent spill, that type of thing. We have to call that in whether we're retained or not. If we're on site and retained, we have to report knowledge of a discharge. So if we're working on historic fill, for example, and we find a tank that's leaking with holes in it, we're obligated to report it by law. We can't say, we didn't see that. We're not supposed to do that. Even if it's on the other side of the site, you're supposed to have some familiarity with your property. We have to disclose remedial action work plan deviations. Say, for example, a remediating party had a work plan that called for excavating a certain area of soil, and the LSRP is retained and finds out, they just capped it or they just filled the hole in and didn't do anything. We have to report that to both the remediating party and the DEP. Next slide, please.
William, we have like 5 minutes, okay? About 5 minutes?
Almost done. So we need to also correct key deficiencies in documents. If we see something wrong in any of those those key submittals, we have to fix them. We can't just leave it. That includes old NFAs. I use the term trust but verify. So if the state closed out a case in the 90s or early 2000s, I will pull the files and take a look at them, make sure it was done properly. I just did one in New Brunswick a year or two ago. Submit all copies of all documents. When the RAO, the final response action outcome, is issued, we attach everything to it that we relied on, and we're required to retain our records for 10 years. Next slide. Okay. So the relationship, one of Rachel's asks on this presentation is, what's the DEP LSRP relationship? Beyond the high level meetings we have monthly and quarterly with the state, we submit documents to the Bureau of Case Assignment Initial Notice. Bureau of Inspection Review then they have to inspect every document they receive, which is that long list of reports I mentioned. If there are any issues, they go to a component review. Serious issues, they go to a comprehensive review. The DEP, as of now, grants remedial action permits, not the LSRP. We were not granted that function. That may change a little bit, permit by rules being discussed, some other issues on historic fill, for example. And again, we're working with top-level folks in the DEP on a stakeholder process, that RPII initiative, to help improve or streamline and remove the bottleneck on permits. Next slide. Just threw in a case study. This is the Rose M. Lopez School in Perth Amboy. It was an old fuel distributor, had a hospital annex, residential, and if memory serves, a small concrete plant. A scrapyard as well. So we were the fourth environmental consultant, first, second LSRP on the site. We had to do a very extensive site and remedial investigation to delineate the extent of contamination, proved historic fill was site-wide, and they had a bunch of other areas of concern we had to deal with. But we worked with the School Development Authority, DEP, and the Perth Amboy Board of Education. It's basically installed a site cap per the DEP's presumptive remedies. If you pass by, this is down Siemens-Sayer Ave in New Brunswick, right at the corner. The ground cover looks like Fort Knox. Nice thick concrete, artificial field, pavement, sidewalks, play areas, that type of thing. And we worked with the state, despite our best efforts. We found one tank that was in the sidewalk, but we found the piping. And the client hadn't allowed us to go do at the time, we weren't really allowed to go off site. So we missed the tank out in the sidewalk, but there's a pipe connecting it to the old hospital annex that used to be there, kind of in the northern corner of the site there, the bigger part of the parcel. But we addressed it. We dealt with it. The SDA, through their consultants, because they were building at the time, had an LSRP on staff. We worked with that LSRP and the DEP to address that tank, and there was a small heating oil tank found under an old house. And then when re-engaged, we're going to get a deed notice, soils remedial action permit to address the historic fill, which is really the only remaining area of concern. There's going to be some groundwater monitoring and biennial inspections. And last slide. That's just me. If you need my contact information, if you need me, I'm available for questions, phone, email, or if you have any now. Yes, ma'am.
I can state your name and your organization because other people may have gotten on or off the call.
Hi, Paula Rogovan, Don't Gas the Meadowlands Coalition. A couple questions for you. How does the public know if, for example, Copper's Coke has been remediated, the section New Jersey Transit where they want to build a gas power plant along near the Hackensack River, despite community opposition? How would the if it is already capped, how would construction of a gas plant impact the cap?
Good questions. Yeah.
I have a couple.
Can I answer them a couple
Sure,
at a
sure.
time?
Yeah.
I'm losing my memory. Really to check, and I mentioned this before, NJGeoWeb, which is a program online through the DEP website, that will allow you to look at the history of the site. Okay, so you can determine what contaminants are there, is soil or groundwater impacted. If a remedial action has been implemented, there is an official cap that has a permit. You could also pull that up. There's clickable fields within that. So you can get a lot more information than you could even a year or two ago. So I'd invite you.
Where is that?
NJGeoWeb.
GeoWeb.
If you want to see me later, I can
Sure.
pull up the
Thank
link
you.
for you. Your second question relating to disturbance of a cap.
Yeah.
That is typically included in the capping or remedial action permit process because a deed notice is required. Okay, so that property through your tax records is a deed notice, like a lien. Okay, so the property is encumbered with a deed notice, and that deed notice will reiterate all those issues. It'll have a description of the cap, description of the contamination, and meets and bounds so a surveyor can lay it out. If that cap is disturbed, there's a process, and it's usually laid out in the deed notice. You have to notify the state. Sometimes you need a work plan, unless it's, I think, less than 60, 90 days disruption. So construction would be a major project. So if they disturb that cap, they're going to be obligated to put it back in, as was.
Wow.
Your next questions.
Okay. The Keysby Brownfield, has that been fully remediated? And would the construction of a gas plant there disrupt and expose the brownfield toxins?
William, I'll answer that.
Go ahead.
Our Brownfield Development Project Manager is just had his knee replaced, so he is out of the office. And I will have Anthony Finley interact with you on that. So we'll handle that, Paula.
Thank you.
Through email, and Tony will be, even though he can't walk too well, he will respond by email pretty quickly.
I want to mention one other thing. It's not very commonly looked at, the technical assistance grants program through the state. If you are a community organization or an environmental organization, you can get grants up to $20,000 to go hire your own LSRP to look it over. So if you want to see me afterwards or during the break, basically it's a form, it's a submittal, you got to prove who you are, et cetera. And they give you money to go hire an LSRP, not to sample, but to review the information on the site and advise you.
Great. And my last question, has the Passaic Valley Sewerage Commission site in the Ironbound of Newark, has that the area where they want to put a gas plant?
You're asking about specific properties.
Is that a brownfield site? Or has it
I'm not
been?
familiar either, William. So, I mean, Paul, you can email me. It's not currently under the purview of the Brownfields office. I can tell you that.
What you can do, and that's a well-known facility, again, look on GeoWeb. They'll actually, in Data Miner, you get the program interest number. You can go over to Data Miner. You can pull up who their LSRP is and their contact information.
Yeah.
And LSRP, remember something, they're also obligated to respond to questions from the public.
Good.
Okay?
Yeah,
So
because that was an industrial area, so
I'm just not familiar with that.
for decades and
I've
decades.
sent water there from remediation, so, filter,
Yeah.
send water there. But I haven't worked on the site, so I can't answer your question.
Okay, thank
But
you
there
so
will
much.
be an LSRP of record on
There
that
should,
site
if
because
they're-
I'm pretty
they
sure it's a
remediate.
contaminated site.
If they've remediated, they should have hired an LSRP.
Well, even if they're in the process, right, there'll
They
be an
should have.
LSRP of record who can answer your questions on that, Paula. But we're not familiar with that project.
Just
Thank
so you know, LSRP of record is not a term. It's retained LSRP.
That is correct.
So, any other questions?
Thank you.
Any online questions? Okay,
Oh, yeah, one more.
John Hogue. Oh my gosh. Here.
Hey, William, good summary, and thanks for the
Thank you.
presentation. Just wanted to had a question, or I guess just wanted to get some clarification around the Spill Act liability relief. My understanding is you can get relief from both permit fees and timeframes, where you said, timeframes.
Yeah, I was told timeframes not so much, but
Yeah,
you may have.
So I do have some
special-
experience there. So I just want to
Fair
clarify
enough.
because I think it's important for Brownfield redevelopment, especially for non-responsible parties that rely on public funding and things like that. You are able to kind of turn off and turn on when you're actively remediating or investigating. So and it's important because a lot of these parties don't have money, right? So they get a grant, they're able to do a phase of work. You sort of have to turn on the trigger, notify DEP. You're still non-responsible, but we're doing the work. And then you start accumulating fees and time frame obligations. But you could turn that off, and as soon as your funding runs out, and then you're only really paying the fees for the years that you're actually doing the work. So I just don't want to discourage people from proceeding with cleanups.
I would
under that
respond that the Spill Act liability exemption is a good tool in the toolbox. It could be case specific. It's just in my sites recently, half dozen, 7 some odd sites. I was told that because they were ongoing, they're old cases and they've already been purchased. It's submitted the form after the fact, so we think the timeframes would still apply, but we're hopeful we're getting a break on all the fees.
Okay. Yep. Just good to look in. Just don't want to
Thank you.
discourage people.
No,
So
it's all
thanks.
good.
All right.
But John, thank you for that clarification. And we work really closely with municipal governments and LSRPs to immediately turn off the fees when the grant monies run out.
Yeah. Thank you.
William, thank you so much. And as William said, we work really closely with LSRPs in the redevelopment process. And in addition to the department, the LSRPs will be responsive to questions about redevelopment. So don't ever hesitate to email us in the Brownfields office or the LSRP that is retained for that site that you're interested in. What's next on the agenda, Rachel? Then come on up. Our HDSRF coordinator, who manages our HDSRF section, Rachel Stopper.
Thank you, Frank. I'm going to see if I can get this clicker to work. Yes. Okay. The clicker is working. So hello, I'm Rachel Stopper, and I'm an HDSRF coordinator. HDSRF stands for Hazardous Discharge Site Remediation Fund, and it is the state brownfield fund. I'm just going to give a few updates regarding the program. So at this time, we still have 2 full-time HDSRF coordinators, myself and Charlotte Leon, who is here with us today. And we're also going to have Jamila Harris, who is sitting to my right. She's going to be looking at HDSRF applications for counties that haven't had an assignment, HDSRF coordinator assignment for some years. So some updates regarding the fund itself. Right now, there is an uncommitted balance of $49.1 million. And this year, so for the calendar year, the DEP has sent over $6.7 million of recommendations to the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. So something that I wanted to talk about today is the HDSRF review process. I'm going to talk about the process from the DEP side, and after I'm finished speaking, EDA is going to come up here and discuss the application approval process from the EDA side. So when an application comes to the department, we perform an administrative and technical review. So we are looking at the application, but we're also looking at very specific attachments that are required. And the main part of our review are those very important attachments, and I'm going to talk about them. So for our public entities and our nonprofits, and I'm putting in nonprofits there because the requirements are very similar. So one thing that we do need is a resolution. So in addition to the application, we need a municipal resolution or a nonprofit resolution that authorizes application to the HDSRF and also demonstrates commitment to redevelop. We are also looking at a scope of work and cost estimate. And all that is the work that you're asking to be funded and how much it costs. And the cost estimate should be itemized without lump sums. And we're also asking for site control documentation, whatever that may be. That might be a deed if you own the property. You might have a tax sale certificate if you own the property through delinquent taxes. You might not own the property, and that's okay. You're still eligible for HDSRF. There's specific language you can put into your resolution that you plan to voluntarily acquire the property in the future for the purpose of redevelopment. And then we just need that language in the resolution. Now for our public remedial action grants, which I think I covered these a few presentations ago. These are remedial action grants for our public entities. So for the 75% recreation conservation grant, in addition to the documents that I described, although site control is not required for the remedial action grants, we need a deed restriction. This can be in draft form, and it's the deed restriction would describe the area that you are asking for HDSRF funding for, and the fund would pay for remediation within that deed restricted area. And we also need a redevelopment plan. The statute asks for a comprehensive redevelopment plan, but a site description and a site rendering is just fine. Now for our 75% renewable energy grant, the statute is actually not very clear and doesn't have many requirements, but we have found that it works really well if we have the results of a feasibility study, for example, for a solar redevelopment, because that demonstrates to us that the substation can withstand the output of the solar energy project. For our 50% affordable housing grant, we would require HMFA or HUD approvals so that we understand that the affordable housing project is a real project. And I just want to be clear, for the 75% recreation conservation grant, that grant pays for 75% remedial action costs for the end use is recreation conservation. The 75% renewable energy grant pays for 75% of remedial action costs where the end use is renewable energy, such as solar. And the 50% affordable housing grant pays for 50% of the remedial action grants where the end use is affordable housing. And when the application is deemed administratively and technically complete, the DEP sends a letter to the applicant telling you that we have approved your grant and that we are recommending approval to the EDA. And then the EDA will also receive a correspondence from us where we have recommended approval of the grant amount. And I will say that if you submit an HDSRF application and all of the attachments are there and the costs are reasonable, your application will be reviewed more quickly than if not. Thank you. Any questions?
Sure. Can you hear me? The question is from Alex Saltzman. Can HDSRF funding be used to investigate PFAS-related discharges for county or other alike agencies that are investigating their training facilities?
If it is a training facility, it sounds like it's an active use, so they're not qualify as a brownfield. So based on that very general question, I would say it would not be eligible, but we can have a discussion and discuss the project on the side. Yes. Oh, it's very nice to meet you. I'm reviewing one of your applications right now.
Thanks, Laura.
Oh, I can't hear you. I think, yeah, there are scenarios like that. So if you were to maybe work with a private or a public entity, have an agreement with a public entity, and you're working together, I think that would be a scenario where the nonprofit would not need to own the property, but we would probably have the public entity come and apply in that instance.
Any other questions for Rachel?
Yeah, Rachel.
Hello.
I was just speaking to Frank earlier before the presentation started. Again, going back to my public schools background, I had tried, this was years ago, tried to apply for HDSRF on behalf of the school district and was told they were not a designated redeveloper and they're out of luck.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking to Frank a little bit earlier. Is there any way to loosen that requirement, or does the city have to name the Board of Ed? It was a municipal entity, but they're kind of separate but of.
Yeah, the Board of Education is not a public entity that that performs redevelopment activities pursuant to the local redevelopment and housing law.
But in reality, they do, because they're buying old distressed properties and building schools. So I just want to bring it to your attention. I don't know what can be done about it, but that's tax dollars that coming out of the city.
I mean, they're not defined in the local. Yeah, and they're not defined.
Maybe a legislative
right,
fix, but I'd encourage you folks to pursue it, because especially as our population increases, there's a lot of schools buying properties, redeveloping them, usually with an architect engineering team, and it's coming right out of the district's cash fund.
They're added to the definition of a public entity, then, for sure.
It's a school district. It's a public entity. It's just not a redeveloping entity.
Well, Town County Redevelopment Agency would be the public entity, how it's defined in our statute.
And we have worked with redevelopment authorities with on school properties and park properties in the past. So
I think it's happening more than you may suspect.
Okay.
And the town, the school boards are saying, the heck with it, we need a new school.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, Rachel, I think we're going to invite our next distinguished guests up. I think Michael Deely is our next speaker from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, and Michael spent close to 20 years helping us in the HDSRF program at NJDEP. So we're always happy to have Michael back, because he was an integral part of both our HDSRF program and our BDA program for many years. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks, Frank. I'm going to be really quick, I promise. I've got like 8 slides. And one of the reasons why I wanted to speak at the roundtable was just to kind of give you a little bit of information on what we're doing at EDA as far as HDSRF, like the expansion of our team, and then just really try to emphasize that, over the last year and a half at being at EDA, we're really just trying to have like a very open line of communication between the HDSRF staff and our applicants, which are municipalities, counties, and redevelopment agencies. So this is our team. I manage the program. I have one finance officer and an associate and a program associate. The finance officer and associate review applications. The closing officers handle all the grant agreements and the approval letters, and the program associate sends out disbursements. You guys hear from DEP first when the applications are sent in. They're on the front end, and they forward their recommendations. We do our best to interact through emails and electronic messages as opposed to mailing out hard copies of information. But we're always available too, even through DEP and EDA. We work closely with DEP as well, and we meet once a week. We're just really encouraging more activity with the HDSRF program. We're a well-funded program. I think we do a lot of work, a lot of good work, and I think we could reach more people as well if they were aware. So some of the basic things that we're looking for are key deliverables. These are all sort of parts of our approval letters and our grant agreements. Once the application comes over, we have to make a decision as to whether it's an application that we can approve through delegated authority. We can sign off on things up to $1.5 million without taking them to the board. So we don't have a wait time on projects like that. A lot of the applications that we work with are assessment and investigation, so those can move a lot quicker. Okay, let me keep moving quickly. I promised that, right? Okay, so site control or site access is something that we're usually looking for. You don't actually have to own the property to avail yourself to assessment and investigation work. You can hold a tax clearance certificate. You can pass a resolution with the intent to acquire by voluntary conveyance. We know that resolutions are non-binding resolutions. They're local governing body actions. Or you could have outright foreclosed on those properties. I think that's the majority of the applications that we get. It's sort of like in the speculation part, right? Like, you don't know what contamination is there that's been left behind in a brownfield, and you give a municipality an opportunity to take a look before they actually have to make a decision as to whether they're going to buy it or not. Once they have made that decision and then they can plan around what environmental issues they have, then they can really start to dig in and look at some of the other options that they have. It's a two-part process once you receive approval. You're going to get an approval letter from us. It needs a signature from the authorized representative from the governing body. It doesn't always have to be the mayor. It just depends on who is available and who has that authorization. The grant agreements, we try to make them as easy as possible to follow. There are questions that come up periodically. If you've been through the program already a couple of times, you sort of have a handle on it, but if you don't, it can be a little bit intimidating. But we're always available and we're always willing to help and try to move things forward as quickly as possible. So our grant disbursements are either on the front end. That's a question we get sometimes, so the assessment and investigation grants are 100%. So once we've come to agreement on the amount, we're going to send the whole amount out to the municipality or the county or the redevelopment agency. That allows them to pay for the work as they go, and it probably helps move invoicing a lot faster for the contractor as well. It can be ongoing if it's a percentage, but we still try to do our best to meet your timelines and keep your projects moving forward. We do have a post-compliance mechanism for tracking our grants. It does require municipalities or counties or redevelopment agencies to file project summary reports at the end of the year. We do send out batch requests for these, but we also identify them at the times where there's additional work being requested. Like, say, if you come in for supplemental funding, we'll ask that these forms be filled out. Okay, and just the last part, we do an annual report to the legislature every year. We basically report on the amount of funding that's going out, the number of applications that we've processed, and amount of financial assistance and the current funding levels that are, within the program. One of the things that this isn't necessarily directly tied to, but periodically we do legislative amendments to the HDSRF, just trying to stay ahead of the changes in, what type of funding needs might be required or where our requests are coming in. And one of the things that I was going to mention is back in 2005, there was $5 million set aside for a nonprofit grant for assessment and investigation. It was set up as a pilot program. I think we're inching towards maybe 4.3 million, 4.4. So it's sort of like it's kind of time to start looking at the legislation again, maybe making that nonprofit grant more permanent, and then also looking at other changes or other areas. And these are discussions I'm having with my management and my executive team. So I'm hoping to be able to advance that and work with DEP on this as well. And that's my update.
Do we have questions
apologize
for Michael?
not giving you an email, but you can easily find me.
Do we have a question for Michael from the audience or from our virtual friends? Well, here's your chance to talk to the banker, but we'll move on.
Yeah, you can talk to me anytime you want.
Everybody
All
loves
right, thank
talking
you.
to their banker. Thank you, Michael. And we have another colleague from the New Jersey Economic Development Authority, Barbara Vadney, who's going to talk about some brownfield redevelopment incentives. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you. Thank you all. So I use this, which button? Hello, everybody. I'm Barbara Vadney. I'm a team lead at the New Jersey Economic Development Authority in Brownfields and Sustainable Systems. And today I would like to talk to you about two programs that we've been working on and give you updates on these brownfield programs. And I would like to acknowledge our team members in this big effort to get these programs launched: Janelle Johnson, Elizabeth Limbrick, and Melissa Dolinsky. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them at the end of this presentation. So the first program I'm going to talk to you about is the Brownfields Redevelopment Incentive Program. And it provides tax credits to incentivize redevelopment of brownfields throughout the state of New Jersey. So it's a statewide program that you can use. The program is very well funded with $300 million available over a course of 6 years, and it provides incentives on all phases of brownfields redevelopment, from investigation through remediation, and it also includes demolition of buildings and disposal of the structures, asbestos abatement, contaminated paint and wood removal, and infrastructure remediation. Now, the proposed redevelopment project, it says redevelopment project in the title, but it can be a remediation-only project. That would be the simplest way to enter this program. Redevelopment projects can also include non-remediation construction projects. That would be like vertical construction, if this work cannot be separated out from the scope. However, only the remediation work will be reimbursed under this program, and there will be additional compliance requirements for non-remediation construction projects. This program can also be stacked with other funding programs, including Aspire and Historic, which is an EDA tax incentive program also. Aspire is a real estate development tax credit to support commercial, mixed-use, and residential real estate and development projects located in designated incentive areas. And you can also stack this program with other programs, not just EDA programs, but other federal programs. The tax credits for this program can be monetized or sold once. You could do it once. And we're seeing typically for other programs that they can sell the tax credit for 90 cents to the dollar. For this program, the floor is set at 85 cents for a typical project and 75 cents for federal low-income housing projects. That means you can't sell it. The legislation says you can't sell it at a lower level than that. It has to be at that higher level. on the floor. And we have higher incentives in special areas of states, which we'll cover in the next slide. Okay, so the award size. There are two different award sizes for this program. In redevelopment projects that are located within a qualified incentive tract or a government restricted municipality, which is Atlantic City, Patterson, and Trenton, you can get up to 60% of the cost of the eligible remediation, up to a maximum of $8 million. And the developer or the applicant would have to contribute 10% of the remediation costs for their equity contribution. Now you can see this is a mapping tool that we've put together that's available on our website, and it assists with determining the award size and the scoring criteria. So the gray areas would show the qualified incentive tracts. You can see the red areas are the government restricted municipalities, which is Patterson, Trenton, and Atlantic City. It's a very helpful mapping tool that's on our website. And for typical sites outside of those two areas, sites would be eligible for 50% of the eligible remediation costs, up to a maximum of $4 million, with an equity contribution of 20% of remediation costs. So the equity contribution would be a little bit greater in the areas outside those two zones. So key features of BRIP, we fondly call it BRIP. Who's eligible? It's a very broad definition for eligible entities. Eligible entities include private developers, not-for-profits, municipalities, and redevelopment agencies. Sites that are eligible, the site must be a brownfield site, and the applicant must not be in any way liable or responsible for the contamination at the site. Brownfield sites throughout the state of New Jersey are eligible for the program, and you do not need to own the site. The activities, and this is an eligibility wizard that's available, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on another slide. Activities that are eligible, I mentioned already, is remediation activities are eligible. So you'd have, as an applicant, you really have to present reasonable costs. These eligible activities are going to be reviewed by DEP during the review process of the application, and you can include a contingency factor in your project costs. And again, redevelopment project can be a remediation only project. Tax credit are awarded via competitive application process. I want to reiterate that the program is well funded, and we do not anticipate that we will fall short of that. So it is a competitive process. We do have a bar that you have to achieve. You have to be eligible for the program, but we do have good resources for this program. And it's a tax credit. It's a one-time tax credit issued at the year of completion of the remediation, and the tax credit can be sold one time. Like all most EDA programs, prevailing wage applies, and this is true of this program, that prevailing wage applies to the entire site. In addition, construction prevailing wage is for 2 years following the issuance of the tax credit in case there's construction on the site, and a building service prevailing wages for 10 years following project completion. Okay, eligible activities include soil and groundwater investigation, site remediation, hazardous materials assessment and survey, hazardous materials or waste disposal, prior environmental assessments, investigations. We will include environmental investigations within 24 months of the application submission. DEP site remediation and permit fees, planning activities for brownfields, for example, for reuse of the brownfields or remedial action work plan, and then building and structural issues such as the demolition of the structures, the asbestos abatement, PCB removal, contaminated wood or paint removal, and other infrastructure remedial activities. So ideal projects for this particular program would be larger scale remediation and or demolition projects that are on brownfield sites. the applicant, best if they were not an owner of the site, unless it's owned by a public entity due to the ownership liabilities under the New Jersey Spill Act. Workarounds on ownership of the site. You can lease the site, you can enter into a pre-purchase ACO with DEP, or you can structure the deal as to delay the closing on the site until approved by EDA and the redevelopment agreement is executed. And it's really important to come in with well-defined areas of concern in order to provide reasonable remediation costs and that are appropriate for the work, since this tax credit cap cannot be increased. Once it's awarded, it cannot be increased. And developers that are familiar with prevailing wage, that would be ideal, and that a project financing gap exists. This is good news today. Today we are opening up the application for this program. After many, many months of working on it, it's a rules-based program. We've worked on the application and all of the resources that are needed for the application. So it's opening today at 10 a.m., so it should be available on our website. That's the website. It's going to be open for 3 months, so it's going to be open during the summertime. And the application will close for this round on September 21st at 5 p.m. So we put together a one-page checklist to help with applying for the program. It's really important, if you're really interested in this program, to do your prep work. Look at this checklist, go through it. Open up the links, look at the forms, fill in the forms, gather the information that you might need on the site. It'll be really helpful to prepare for the application. Also, some of these items need longer lead times. So one eligibility requirement for this program is that you have support from the governing body. And we do not mean just by the mayor or the business administrator. We really mean like probably a resolution from the governing body that they do support this project. That's important that we have local government support of the project. That might take lead time. You might have to get on the agenda of the local municipality or work through that. So take a look at that checklist. It's also really, I provided email for DEP to reach out to DEP. It's really important to get in front of DEP at that email address to discuss any issues that they will be reviewing, including cost, reasonableness, project costs, and liability for contamination. And these are handy resources that we have on the website currently that will help you put together an application. The eligibility self-assessment tool, which I mentioned previously on another slide, that's takes about 2 minutes. It's 10 questions, 10 eligibility questions that you fill in to see if the site you're working on might be eligible for this program. So that's at the top of the website. Then we have that mapping assistant tool, which is very helpful to understanding the site classification area for your site. Also, there are green remediation requirements that apply to this program. Check out the requirements on our website, and also if future construction is proposed for the project included in your scope of work, then EDA's green building requirements will apply, and that's on the website also. This is, and also DEP's pre-purchase ACO forms are on the website. We also have FAQs, the program flyers, and the program rules. So there's information out there. It's really a great program to transform brownfields into community assets, and we're well funded, and we hope that you'll consider applying for this program. The second program that I would like to discuss, and I hope that EPA is still on the line. It might not be there for Employee Appreciation Day, but we would like to thank you very much for the funding on this program. Last week, the EDA board approved the utilization of $2 million in funds provided by US EPA to EDA for implementing the Brownfield Planning and Assessment Service Program. Plus we're entering into contracts with 5 environmental contracting firms to provide these services. So what does this program do? EDA procures the contractor for this free service to public and privately owned properties as potential sites. And it provides assistance for phase 1 environmental assessments, preliminary assessments, site investigations, remedial investigations, as well as brownfield planning services. And if you're interested, you can submit a form to that link. Or if you have questions, you can email that. But it's recently approved by our board last week, so that's great news too. And this is our email address. If you have any questions, we can follow up with you, and we will also post any answers publicly on the Brownfield tax credits that come out to that email address. So please consider applying for these programs. Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for Barbara?
What was that? We are on LinkedIn. We're on social media, EDA in general. Yeah, and on our website. Our website really has a lot of good information. It's worthwhile following us on LinkedIn or social media because there's always good programs coming out on different initiatives, and for small businesses, and there's a lot of really good initiatives. So,
Rachel, did we promise our IT folks to take a break? Yeah, Jeff, we're gonna have to hold because we want to get your presentation. Barbara, will you be with us the rest of the day?
Yeah.
Till 12:30? Okay, then we'll have. Is that okay? We can ask Barbara questions. She'll be here till 12:30.
Or you can ask me afterwards.
Yeah, either one.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks, Barbara.
Okay.
Yeah, we promised the folks doing the work behind the scenes that we would take a 5-minute break. So we're going to start promptly at 11:45. Is that 5 minutes from now? No, we're going to start at 11. Well, do we need 5 minutes, or can we start at 11:45? All right. So next on the agenda is Ann Lazo, who is the new Executive Director for the Brownfield Coalition of the Northeast. Some people call BCON. I like to say Brownfield Coalition of the Northeast. Brownfield Coalition of the Northeast has been a tremendous partner of ours for many years. They have done a great job getting the word out about brownfield redevelopment, different incentives that we have, how to go through the process. And their former Executive Director, Sue Boyle, was a personal mentor in brownfield redevelopment. So I want to thank Sue Boyle for her service, and I want to welcome Ann Lazo as the new Executive Director of BCON. Ann?
Thank you very much. I appreciate you asking me there, and Sue Boyle was a mentor for me as well too. So the transition has been somewhat bittersweet for me. So for those of you who don't know BCON or the Brownfield Coalition of the Northeast, I'm just going to quickly read our mission statement here. So BCON's mission is to provide a platform for the exchange of ideas, best practices on the best benefits of brownfield remediation, resilience, and the sustainable redevelopment, and to work with public, private, and regulatory stakeholders in our region to facilitate economic activity and growth with a focus on environmental, social, and governance factors. So that is the mission of BCON. And again, thank you for having me here. I'm Ann Lazo, the Executive Director for BCON. And if you could switch the slide for me, please. So we're going to I'm going to be pretty brief here today, just going to go through some of the changes at BCON with leadership and committees. We're going to talk about expansion of membership. We're going to talk about some exciting things with our scholarship fund, and then also talk about partnering with like-minded organizations. And then finally, I'm going to end with talking about our upcoming Northeast Sustainable Communities Workshop. Next slide, please. So the leadership changes. With Sue leaving, I'm now the new executive director, and we have an executive assistant who's Michelle Hurley. President is Melina Ambrosino. She's with Cherry Tree Group out of Massachusetts. We have two vice presidents, Nancy Straczynski from Alpha and Almarie Roberts. And I don't remember, she just recently changed companies, so she's within a new company. We have our treasurer, which is Sandra Gorin, and she is with Vertex Engineering. And then there is the secretary, Lee Hoffman, who's with Pullman and Conley up in Connecticut. Next slide, please. So one thing that we've done since starting out with Melina and Nancy and Almarie has been doing a little bit of restructuring for our committees so that they're a little bit more organized and flowing better. So we have expansion teams, and expansion teams are the ones who are heading up, expanding into other areas. We are everywhere from West Virginia on up to Maine. So we've got the West Virginia, Maryland, Delaware expansion team. We've got New Jersey, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, and then New England that encompasses Massachusetts, Connecticut, and so on and so forth. We also have a regulatory committee. They meet once a month, and they also provide us with information on all the regulatory updates going out there. We have a brand new legislative committee that we're trying to get some people to assist with. We have our marketing committee that gets the words out, and we have our scholarship and education committee. Next slide, please. So one thing that we're trying to do, our membership has been mainly focused on consultants over the years, and we asked our membership what they really want in the organization. They do want high quality educational events and resources, but they also want the ability to gain new business from the organization. So our goal this year and the next coming years are to expand more into real estate developers who are dealing with brownfield properties, attorneys, architects, engineers, bankers, insurance people. So these are just some of the areas that we're trying to expand our membership so that we have a broader audience that we're reaching, but also a broader resource base as well. Next slide, please. We are really excited about the scholarship fund. It's not all finalized yet, but we do want to keep mentioning it wherever we go. In the past, we've given out small grants or funds, scholarships in the amount of like $250 to $750, and we didn't feel that it was really meeting the goals of what BCONE wanted for helping that next generation of brownfield professionals. So we recently got in touch with an organization called Foster Forward. And what they do is when children are aging out of the foster care system, when they're turning 18, a lot of those kids don't have any place to go. They end up homeless. So we are working with Foster Forward on creating a scholarship grant for students that are within that program that want to get into the environmental and brownfield areas. So we're still working out the details on that. And we're also looking with other like-minded organizations so that we can give larger grant awards, and we can also give them to people who truly need them, instead of a $150 scholarship grant that won't even cover the cost of books. So that's kind of where we're going at with the scholarship fund, and we're looking to announce more of that soon in the near future. Next slide, please. So one of the things that BCONE does is we partner with like-minded organizations. You heard from Bill Call earlier today. We have a good, because of Sue Well and she had involvement with all these different organizations, we've developed partnerships over the year. So we have an excellent working relationship, collaborative relationship with the New Jersey Licensed Site Remediation Professionals Association, the New York City Brownfield Partnership, the Society of Women Environmental Professionals. We are looking for other like-minded organizations to develop collaborative partnerships with. I always say that competition is great, but collaboration is powerful. So if you are part of an organization that wants to collaborate with us, please give me a call. My information will be at the end of this slide presentation. Next slide, please. And last, we have on here the save the date for our next Northeast Sustainable Communities Workshop. That is happening in Worcester, Massachusetts. I think I said that right. On September 19th and 20th. We had 37 proposals come in for the call for presentations. I think it's probably the biggest that we've had yet. We have 21 panels who are going to be presenting. We're going to be having pre-conference content. We may be trying to have our people on a regulatory committee do and ask the regular session before the conference. We're going to be doing some scholarship fundraisers there, just great content to our Polar Park. The content is not just centered on Massachusetts, it's all over the Northeast. So our panelists are going to be developers, consultants, engineers, people who talk about tax credits. So it's going to be pretty wide number of subjects that'll be of interest to a lot of people within the brownfield industry. And that's it, except I want to say one more thing that I forgot to mention when it comes to membership. We do have a no-cost membership for government and regulators. So if you are in that category and you want to become a member of BCON, just go to the website, onto the join page, and there's a little section that you go down there and actually join the organization. And then if you can just turn to the last slide, and that has my contact information. Yeah, there we go. And feel free to email me. We also have a toll-free number, and you can also visit our website for all the upcoming events we have. And again, thank you for having me.
And thank you. Let's give it up for Ann at BCON and LSRPA and many hats that I'm probably not even aware of, Ann. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for Ann? Audience? All right. Thank you so much, Ann.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. My name is Frank McLaughlin. I manage the Brownfield Development Area Program, and I'm going to try to be quicker than usual. Michael was too true to his name, so I'm going to try to do the same. And we're going to have a short question and answer period at the end, so I can answer more specific questions at that time. But quickly, we have 31 brownfield development areas in 29 municipalities across New Jersey. Brownfield development area is done through a application process with the New Jersey DEP, and we are expecting to open the application process this summer. The work we do is very meaningful to the public and the residents that we serve. Michael and I were at an event yesterday in Camden for the opening of the Dominic Andahar Park, named after a 6-year-old boy in Camden who confronted an armed rapist who was attacking his sister. And he died protecting his older sister, his 12-year-old sister. The playing field in North Camden where Dominic Andahar played was not the same playing field that my children play at, or maybe anybody here's children play at. It wasn't dragged. It had weeds in the infield. It was literally built on a brownfield site. Literally, we pulled out a 20,000-gallon oil tank in center field 2 feet below grade, as Michael remembers, because we had to pay for it. So what we do in our office and the projects we fund through HDSRF is really important to the everyday lives of people. And nothing can bring back that 6-year-old boy who saved his sister from an armed rapist, who's now in jail for, I think, 111 years or something like that. But we opened up a park with about $480,000 of HDSRF money, about $240,000 worth of EPA money, and Camden County funded the beautiful playing field that sits behind me. That is standing with me is Council President Angel Fuentes, Camden City Council President Angel Fuentes, who I've had the pleasure of working with over 20 years in Camden. And the other side of me is Keith Walker, who heads the Department of Public Works. And as my enforcement program knows, much of illegal dumping that occurs in our cities, including Camden, occurs at brownfield sites. So the importance of investigating, remediating, and reusing these brownfield sites is extremely important to the residents who live next to or down the street from these brownfield sites. Over the history of our HDSRF program, it's given out over $430 million. Most of that money has gone to environmental justice communities. I wanted to be very clear about that. I know the city of Camden has received probably in the neighborhood of $45 million. And we're on our fourth or fifth park rehabilitation project in the city of Camden alone right now, all funded through our HDSRF program. So the importance of this program to children, to people like Keith Walker who played football in the city of Camden as a child, but all their games were played outside of Camden because they don't have a regulation playing field. Until about 2 years ago when $2.5 million of HDSRF money created the expansion of Whitman Park on the former Camden Lab site, which was the largest illegal dumping site in the state of New Jersey. 4-acre illegal dumping site, 7 abandoned buildings, old laboratory, very close to Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital, if you know the city of Camden. So watching Keith Walker cry and all the football coaches cry because they could finally have a home game in the city of Camden for their own children. That's what the program is about. So the program does economic development, it does housing, it does a lot of open space, but it also does a lot to bring environmental benefits back to overburdened communities. And overburdened communities are not just defined by the disproportionate amount of point sources to air, water, and land. They're also defined by the lack of environmental and public health benefits. And we have some great news about all the public health benefits and environmental benefits that the Brownfield Development Area Program and the HDSRF program have provided over the years, and a report's going to be out very shortly about that. Some of that information is behind me. 553 acres of new open space that was formerly brownfield sites, from Newark to Trenton to Camden and many cities in between. Just think about that. 553 acres of abandoned, contaminated industrial or commercial properties are now public open spaces. Just really amazing that this program, thanks to our EDA partners and thanks to our legislature who funds us through the corporate business tax. All right, next slide. Sure, I'm happy to take questions at any time. So that's why I'm here. When we prepare the land by first investigation and then remediation, we have partners that they step in. They can step in at any point, but typically we're working with municipal entities like the City of Camden, City of Trenton, and others, right, who hold these properties harmless through tax foreclosure, liens, basically deadbeat responsible parties who have not cleaned up the site and left town. And the number of those sites is staggering. So for every dollar of hazardous discharge site remediation fund money that we've granted from 2006 to 2021, when we've done this study with the University of Wisconsin, about a little over $8 was leveraged, mostly from the private sector, mostly by building the affordable housing, mostly by putting the park amenities on top of those parks. So that's the leveraging we're talking about. Our fund only funds remediation. We have remedial action grants. We can't, unfortunately, pay for beautiful park amenities, multi-purpose football fields. That's another project we were talking about. We can't build affordable. We'd love to, but we can't build affordable housing. We have other state agencies and federal agencies to do that. So that's what I'm talking about, the leveraging. You're welcome. These are our 31 brownfield development areas, again, covering about 3,300 acres of some of the most distressed lands in the most difficult neighborhoods of our cities, from Rahway all the way to little towns like Haddon Township and Salem City that I showed earlier. Here's a map of them. I'm happy to answer questions later. In the May edition of the League of Municipalities magazine, we announced that we are going to be reopening the Brownfield Development Area Designation Program. In addition to the story I just told about Camden, we have a gentleman in the audience, John Hogue, who I've had the pleasure of working with close to 20 years, right, John? And he is soon going to tell the story, and I won't scoop him too much because he's going to tell the story here. But we had to spend about $7 million of HDS or grant money just to remove unexploded ordinances, to do the basic brownfield and landfill investigation and remediation that is happening now. So 20-year relationship and many obstacles, but that's the type of commitment that our program has to municipalities like Palmyra. And John, we're going to let you tell the story soon here, I promise. And you can ask any questions. But what's the value of the Brownfield Development Area program to a municipality like Palmyra, John? I'm going to give you the floor for a second because you can say it better than I can.
Yeah, I'd say indispensable. Not just from a funding standpoint, but just technical support, collaboration. Palmyra is a tiny municipality, 7,000 people. EJ community, the BDA was subject to much illegal dumping, as Frank mentioned, like most brownfields, but a lot of other uses, a lot of illicit activity, illegal composting operations, filling operations. It was an old, I think William mentioned some old police firing ranges. Well, this was an old Army firing range, World War II era, where they were testing recoilless rifles, basically anti-tank artillery that, munitions this big intended to blow, holes through tanks, right? And the borough just couldn't get the area addressed. It's so blighted. It's about a third of their town and generated $50,000 in tax rateables. So nothing, right? But it used up so much resources. The composting operations I mentioned that weren't being done, according to regulations, constant fires with that, just a burden on the municipality, a flea market activity, a lot of crime elements there, copyright, type stuff. This as well as just other things that just required so much police support. So it was just draining the resources and not bringing in any resources. So it started with the BDA. They were one of the original 4 BDAs, and I think that allowed some funding to start to do preliminary assessment work and site investigation work, and you found out that it was a recoilless rifle testing range, right? Like no one really knew the records, and the Army at the time says, well, we wouldn't have left anything behind, top secret World War II stuff, and sure enough, we pulled 300 unexploded ordnance out there. And this ordinance is in a flea market where people are pounding in tent stakes and things like that. So, it's just what could have happened if it wasn't a BDA and didn't get those resources. But it was a long, it was a long road. There's, 20 years is a long time. These redevelopments aren't supposed to take that fast. I think some of the criteria are the ability to get it done, right, a little faster. And there was certainly hope that we could do that, but litigation, between property owners, between, there was organized crime elements involved in the BDA. So, it's an interesting story, and Frank and I will be telling it at an upcoming conference in July, but and others involved in the project. But, it's a success story. It's an EJ success story. There was environmental justice litigation under the new environmental justice law related to some activity that was going on there that we were able to, through the redevelopment process and bringing in partners, get that settled. Now there's, it's not the most attractive redevelopment, it's warehouses, but the market was right for it and allowed for a lot of job creation, well-paying jobs for people without college degrees in the local community. And most significantly, the economic benefits to the borough. I said $50,000 a year. Now they're getting millions of dollars a year for the next 40 years, pumped into the community through, redevelopment area financing. So, pilot program. So, and just the cleanup perspective, there was the whole community had access to this, and a lot of health department reports, people getting sick, dogs getting sick, we found every kind of waste out there imaginable, from medical waste that were brought up earlier, and it wasn't just bottles in this case, it was actually like blood-filled vials and stuff. It was, just so much stuff back there, and finally it's largely cleaned up. We were able to leverage the funds enough to address the uncertainties, environmental uncertainties, to bring in a redevelopment partner to kind of finish the job for us. And during the process, a 1 million square foot warehouse was constructed, is currently occupied, currently providing jobs. Another 1 million square foot warehouse is under construction on a large 70-acre municipal landfill that I forgot to mention earlier that is also blighting the property. So again, just great success. It was a long time coming. It was a struggle, and a little municipality like Palmyra wouldn't have been able to do it without support, from the department. And it goes, that the HGSR support was fantastic. Certainly couldn't have been done without that. But even, just support with handling legal matters and things like that. And and ultimately it was representatives of this group that brought in the redevelopment partner for some other projects that they worked on that had done a fantastic job at some other BDAs, and they partnered with Palmyra. It was a great fit, and they're doing a great job now, and it's just about done. But it's a fantastic success story.
Well, I can't say a better advertisement for the importance of other deserving municipalities that have brownfield areas to submit a brownfield development area application for designation, and that information will be coming out later this summer. And John, you did not mention the trails and how many affordable housing units were built there. So without any further delay, we have a great story. Another very important part of our Brownfield Development Area program, even though this is not a Brownfield Development Area site, but our HDSRF program funds not only affordable housing projects, open space projects, but also green energy projects. And I want to invite my friend Jeff Dye up to talk about a great project in National Park. And as Jeff's coming up, Jeff also helped, and his colleague Trevin Hauser helped on the Salvation Army Camden project that's built on a landfill, former landfill in the city of Camden. So thanks, Jeff, for the help many years ago. Tell us the great National Park story.
Will do. Thanks for the intro, Frank, and thanks for the invite. If I can get this, there we go. So I'll be as fast as I can here. All right. No, it's okay. It's all right. I knew we would be at the end of the day here, and everybody's getting hungry and all that. So, John, I appreciate the update on Palmyra. We were looking at that project many years ago, and appreciate the invite. And again, the amazing work that the Brownfields group does here at the DEP with Frank and Rachel and Ron. We've been working closely with them for a couple of decades on a number of different projects now. So, this is actually...
We can skip that one for the sake of time, Jeff,
right.
Unless you really want me to talk about it.
I think I touched on most of these items here, but we can come back to that. So again, 2 seconds on me, LSRP, Resource Renewal. I'm here to represent today the redeveloper, NP Renewal at National Park. I've been at this environmental stuff for 1 year longer than Bill mentioned, and I won't mention that date just to protect the innocent here. So I'd like to thank the stakeholders, most importantly the Borough of National Park. It's been a great public-private partnership with them, and obviously the DEP and the Brownfields office and the NJEDA. There's some of my contact information down in the corner. So today, just get a little background, go over some project points. I've got a bunch of photos and videos, which we'll go through quickly, and we'll talk about the impact this project has had on the borough, which has been very positive. We're almost, like Palmyra, we're almost at the finish line here. So the background in the early days, this site is the lots are a total of 73 acres, historically mudflats and marshland. The borough acquired the site in 1954. And the borough leased the site to Robert Hawthorne, Inc. in 1970s. Robert Hawthorne, Inc. had a contract to demolish Society Hill in Philadelphia. So this landfill initially operated as a C&D debris landfill from Philly, and toward the latter end of that, like most municipal landfills back in the day, municipal waste and other stuff started going in there. And the upland area, you'll see some figures here, is 53 acres, and that's the part that we focused on as far as the remediation redevelopment. Interesting facts, this site is a legacy landfill. It is the first legacy landfill project to enter the solid waste closure SRP program once the legacy landfill law was enacted. There are a couple others that were in there, but this is the first one from kind of start to finish to enter the regulatory process. It's also the first HTSRF landfill closure to renewable energy project that entered the program. There are some others going on right now. And today we're completing final topsoil placement, seeding, and grading. The closure of the landfill physical work should be completed literally in a matter of weeks, middle of the summer, and we'll go through our final documentation certification process. Wrong way. So this is the site. I did use the image here. You can see we're like exit 22 off of 295 here, immediately adjacent to National Park. The National Park is a community you see here to the north of the site, the landfill. National Park is a very small municipality, several square miles, I believe 4. It's named National Park because it's the home of the Red Bank historic battlefield from the Revolutionary War. It is what we'd call a bedroom community. The largest commercial establishment is the new Dollar General in town and the pizza shop, I think. So wonderful people, great partners, love the people down there. They've been great, and they're very appreciative of what's been happening here. You can see some of the other waterways and stuff. Wrong way again, sorry about that. So this again is the site here. You can see the 3 blocks. Again, we're on the Woodbury Creek here. I think it said Big Timber, but this is the Woodbury Creek, and Hessian Run runs all the way up along the landfill site there. And again, you can see the community to the north there. This is a concept plan that we had. It was further developed into a final engineering plan. You can see we've raised the grade and put a solar field up top there on about a 25 to 30 acre raised plateau on the site. This is some slides I'll go through quickly. This is what the site kind of looked like before we started. Undulations all over, your typical old landfill. Here's a winter picture. I'll touch maybe on those, remind me about those ribbons later. First thing we had to do was clear the site to see what was going on. There was a lot of clearing activity. This is not the end pile of wood chips, which were all recycled, by the way, but clearing the site was a pretty significant process. You can see when we were done with the clearing, it kind of looked like the moon, if you will, here. And this is our electrical connection coming in for our trailers and our initial setup. You can see we had super silt fence around there. We're dealing with Gloucester County Soil Conservation District. They're one of the tough county soil conservation districts, I'll just point that out. And this is a little time-lapse video, which I think Tyrone said will start. There we go. The first couple slides here are just aerials, and then it'll go into a time-lapse on our drone coverage. We started surveying the site with the drone in about 2001, and have used that for our elevational control and monitoring of the sites. Worked out very well. So this is our time lapse of the drone here. You'll see as it goes through, the dates are clicking off here at the bottom. It's just kind of a neat visual.
And Jeff, people see a nice little treed area there, but this was a landfill.
Oh, this was a landfill,
and it
yeah.
spilled into the Woodbury Creek and wetlands and other things. So I want people to understand that yes, this was a garbage dump with trees growing out of it.
Yes, there are trees, there are automobiles, there are white goods, there are drums, there were lots of things that were in the landfill, and required the remediation. There's not a pointer on here. A pointer? There's not? No. Okay. So that's this is kind of where we look. This is 2 weeks ago. Again, final. Wrong way again. Keep pressing the wrong button. So this is you can see along the shoreline here. Back to what Frank was talking about. There were tricycles along the waterway. There was a lot of that stuff. We brought a lot of that stuff back. One of the features of this project you'll see here is the living shoreline. So this is what it looked like before we started. This is construction living shoreline. In the beginning here, they're laying out the turbidity barrier and had done some initial clearing. This is a creation of the living shoreline area. There it is when it's done with the construction aspects, with some of the riprap and your logs, etc. And then here's some of the plantings. We'll see some views later of how it's grown up, and it's doing very well. This is a view here. You can see right along the waterway here. This is the Hessian Run, which feeds down to Woodbury Creek. This is medium to low tide. That's all water at high tide during the season here. So these are back to some construction on the site areas. Fill material coming in, just getting things ready. This is more recent. These are our slopes. We've got these graded. We've got the matting and the seeding, and that's what's going on right now, or has gone on over the last couple of months. We're actually manufacturing our own topsoil here from clean fill we got from Gloucester County Improvement Authority's landfill, mixing that with compost that we got from Gloucester County's compost facility, and that was a little less expensive than purchasing topsoil, which is expensive, as we know. So this is a little area we'll come back to, this fencing, but this is the backside here. Again, fencing along an area that was left as conservation. That's basically due to the bald eagle. You see this nice, more gentle plateau that comes in from our slopes where our elevated area is. We're looking for open space here. We'll talk about that a little bit. Frank and I are going to work on that. We were prohibited from putting our walking trails around here by the T&E folks because we were allegedly going to scare the bald eagles away. I told them the bald eagles don't go in the trees. They go up on the cell tower because they can really see the prey much easier way down from it, which is true, actually. This is an interesting feature. This is the discharge from our surface water system on the site. We'll talk about that in a moment. That's been a big benefit to the borough. Here it just shows the different three aspects: laying the topsoil, doing the seeding, and then we put the matting over top. And we put some rye seed on top of that. That's the standard seeding recipe. The rye seed grows first. The high quality no mow mix seeding with wildflowers and stuff, it takes 1 or 2 seasons to grow out. The rye seed comes up sooner, establishes some erosional control. When that dies off, along with the matting, it provides nutrients for the permanent growth to come in. We're still leaving a buffer along here. This beyond the landfill boundary. There's some trees along the roadway here, along Grove Ave, that are going to be left there. So this is we had to keep some of these trees. That was the ribbon around those trees. Those are bald eagle perch trees. Some of them have already died, which we knew would probably happen. They're going to be there for a while. And lo and behold, we were out. You were there with us, right? Yeah, we were out on one of Rachel's tours of the site, and the bald eagle was in the tree. It was out on the site, so it's working, right? I guess. So, but I can promise you, going down the Riverwinds, if you guys have been down there, that was another project. There's a bald eagle nest right under where the gas-powered golf carts drive, and it doesn't bother them at all, along with construction activity. So I don't really think that they're going to get scared away. So we're still pushing to have this be a public access walking trail down along here with educational features, et cetera. So working on that. So again, this is the overview. And if you can see to the right there, where you can see the trees that are still there from before, that was also part of the negotiation with land use and the threatened and endangered species folks. We left the purge trees, and they wanted to leave a space that wasn't disturbed. So this area of the site, from our prior investigation, just pretty much had C and D debris. So it's really just bricks and not the hazardous stuff, not the elevated area. We got 30-foot thick waste in the middle of this landfill with all kinds of stuff in there, like we mentioned, not only municipal, but there was some other kind of dumping in there. But down at this side, it's just really bricks, et cetera. And we've left that, the fence is the engineering control down there, and that's left to be foraging habitat for the bald eagle. Reality is, the bald eagle doesn't sit in those trees. They're not very good for that purpose, but it was part of the agreement that we came up with, again, with strong support and help from the Brownfield's office to get the approvals through all of the different groups within the department. In this case, land use, T&E species folks. Also down in that same corner, down by the waterways where the stormwater comes out, it runs up along that T&E area and then goes all the way up along the northern boundary of the site. And there are several inlets down there. That takes care of all of our northern stormwater controls. That keeps the stormwater and controls it from along the residential properties there. And if you look and see, see a little patch up. Sorry. See a little patch up there, and then along Woodlawn Avenue is that road. And you can see the new asphalt patch there. That's where originally there was an old steel pipe, a 24-inch pipe, that ran from under that road and straight out to the Hessian Run. And it was, I don't know it was 50 years old, so it was all eroded, et cetera. It was in direct communication with the waterway, and under high tide, it was underwater. A lot of flooding coming back up in there. So if you remember that feature, it had it's not really a check valve, there's another name for it, but it acts as a check valve so that at high tide, water doesn't back up and flow through. So we abandoned the old pipe, put in the new stormwater system, and as an added benefit of this, they're not getting flooding at high tide and heavy rain events. There was significant flooding throughout the town during a couple of rain events we had. We just had that big rain a couple of weeks ago, and there was no water on Woodlawn Avenue, which is pretty monumental. It hasn't happened in the 20 or so something years out there, so they were pretty pleased about that. This is actually a mistake, the top line. That's talking about the solar. As I mentioned, completion of the actual landfill closure is weeks, et cetera, away. Total budget for this project, including post-remedial care for the next 30 years, is about $17 million. And post-closure care and O&M is funded from an escrow. Part of this project that helped support the funding, in addition to the HTSRF, it was an alternate fill project. We used our 75th percentile and like one like, got that approved with the help of the Brownfield's office and some I won't call it arm twisting, we'll call it negotiation. And we're able to accept really just historic fill from other sites that came into the site, most of which was processed through a Class B recycling facility. And some of that material was treated, and it was the low levels of PAHs and metals, et cetera, that already existed on the site, and we put it in at lesser concentration that was already within the landfill. And as Bill might have pointed out earlier, most of these landfills have everything in there. So there was a pretty good investigation of what we had, and that's what enabled us to provide that. So that's an important factor that enabled this project to go forward. Wrong way again. So the solar energy benefits, the completion of the solar is scheduled for middle of next year. That's a little bit longer than anticipated. There's some key components on both sides, PSE&G side and on our side, that are back ordered, I understand, and are going to basically take a while for all the components to get here to have the construction. Construction of the solar facility is going to be about 6 months, 5 to 6 months. Our partner in that is Citizens Energy, who is a company out of Massachusetts that's a nonprofit company founded by the Kennedy family that services low-income folks originally in the 70s with heating oil. Now they're 100% renewable energy, and all the profits from their operating companies go up to the nonprofit, and they provide low-income families with heat in the winter primarily and other energy needs. So we're going to generate about 5 to 7 megawatts of electricity. The panels are much more efficient now than they were when we started, so I'm not exactly sure where that number is. We'll have an update on that based on the actual panels when they are procured, which is happening right now. Energy can power for up to about 1,000 homes, which is more than our national park. We're also hopeful that this will be a community solar project that will significantly benefit the residents of the national park and the municipality itself, lowering their energy bills. And we may try to make an arrangement with, I don't know if you saw from the map, the national park is surrounded by West Deptford. And there is a big community center down at the Riverwinds complex. We've talked to them about working with them on some of that. So one of the biggest benefits to the borough is cost avoidance, the $15 to $18 million in cost avoidance. That includes the post-remedial care for the next 30 years. The revenue of the national park in a pilot form is about $100,000 a year. I'm being conservative there because it's a little fluctuating, again, based on the production capacity, which isn't quite defined yet. Their total budget for the municipality for the year is about $1.5 million. So it's a pretty significant benefit for them, percentage-wise, of their budget. And we, the redeveloper, are taking care, again, with the escrow funds, of all the maintenance of the landfill and everything. They don't have any ongoing costs for engineering or contracting or legal or any of that. So that's part of our arrangement with them under the redevelopment agreement. I'm good at that, going both ways. So that's the end of my presentation. So we, again, appreciate the partnership with Brownfield's Office of DEP and the EDA. It's a great project. Everybody's excited about it. And we have a couple more in the works. So we're excited about that.
Thanks, Jeff. Jeff has been at this project for so many years, and his perseverance and patience with different aspects of DEP and other agencies we really appreciate. And he went through his slides pretty quick, but over $11 million in hazardous discharge site remediation fund money to close a landfill that was the town dump that the town could never afford. You heard it only brings in $1.5 million a year in tax revenue.
About what it is, yeah.
So they could never afford to close their own town dump. And now the town dump, well, next year, will be providing green energy to all the homes. And so we do have 75% matching grants for remedial action for green energy projects.
One other thing I should mention here, as far as green out there, it looks like we cleared all the trees, and we're planting 1,700 plus trees out there as part of the mitigation program for the project. So they will be indigenous, better trees than what we're out there, and a significant amount of benefit to the climate from those trees as well. So I neglected to put that in the slide.
We have questions to Jeff about this great project and all the many things and many hurdles he had to leap over to get this project done. Any from our audience?
There's nobody left.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, it's been a pleasure working with you for so long, and I'm finally we got to the grill. Big Timber, that's Gloucester County.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, that's the
What did I
Gloucester
say?
City project that we've worked on.
It's
We're trying to
Gloucester
work
County,
on
right?
for.
The Gloucester
So,
City's in Camden County.
yes, but it's Big Timber Creek. That's where I got the creek
Yes.
wrong, right? Okay, thank you. I mean,
No worries.
contaminated sites next to many creeks in New Jersey, right? So, unfortunately, we're past our time, and I really appreciate our speakers. William, thank you. Jeff, thank you again. Barbara, Michael, thank you. Anybody have maybe one last question for our speakers while they're here? I did offer that. So, sir, go ahead. Again, your name and.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Charlie Cradaville with Food and Water Watch, and really appreciated that last presentation. It's amazing to see what can be done when people persevere and have the resources to deliver for local communities. Obviously, renewable energy is a positive land use. Many of us here are concerned about the potential for another gas plant in the Casby BDA. As you relaunch the BDA program, would you consider enacting a rule or some sort of requirement that no fossil fuel developments be allowed, but incentivize renewable? Since it's working out so well there and on track to succeed, could we have the new version of the BDA not allow fossil fuel projects as a potential development?
Thanks for that question. Well, right now, we have legislative authority for our hazardous historic site remediation fund. So we're allowed to provide 75% remedial action matching grants for green energy projects in BDAs and also other brownfield sites. We have a lot of climate criteria in our scoring for our brownfield development area applications, smart growth, other things. It is under review right now. That's what's holding out our application release is our management reviewing, and I will bring that concern up, and you'll have my email address, and you can actually email me that, and I will raise it up the chain. But we do have a lot of, as you know, that our commissioner is very interested in not only environmental justice but also in climate change, and climate resiliency and climate adaptation. And brownfields redevelopment is really the most sustainable development there's out there. We know that the carbon footprint in places like Hudson County, Essex County are 1/4 the carbon footprint in our outlying suburban areas. But unfortunately, we don't control local land use decisions, right? So, that's done at a local level. So, but there are many great candidates for green energy. We think landfills, and there's a lot of green energy going on the urban warehouse projects that some of the folks talked about here. And we just had an opening in Perth Amboy that again, reusing old Asarco and National Lead land that sat fallow for over 50 years. And we think warehousing is what the local government wanted there, but we also got significant green energy there. There's significant green energy going on in the Palmyra warehouse projects that John talked about. So there are a lot of opportunities to do green energy on brownfield sites and landfills. And but I'll bring your concern up, and you feel free to email me.
Thank you for lifting that up.
I have a follow-up to that. So the grants are defined statutorily, and so if you want to see an incentive for renewable versus fossil fuels, you can always follow up with your state representative, and they can help to influence changes in the statute.
Thank you. I'll do that.
I think your hand was up first, but I'm gonna ask you, then I'll come back to you.
Magazine, I noticed how it was discussing how the DEP
Oh, thank you so much.
There's
Sorry, okay.
different people.
Yes, I just wanted to express appreciation also for these very informative presentations and just to hear all the great work that's being done on the brownfields in various parts of the state is very encouraging. And I just, noticed in this magazine is talking about how the DEP joins forces with dedicated local stakeholders. And I was just wondering, particularly with the KSB BDA, that this company, Competitive Power Ventures, has been issued by the DEP $69,000 worth of fines due to violations dating all the way back to 2015. So I just wonder, can we trust such a company to redevelop the brownfield there? It just feels like we're trusting the fox to guard the hen house, since it's a company that already has a record of so many violations over multiple years. So it seems like dozens and dozens of violations. So is this a good, company? And they're proposing this new CPV2. Just seems like very not a good, reliable company to partner with. And then I was also wondering about the local stakeholders. Are there any environmental groups among the local stakeholders in that particular project?
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm unfamiliar with the enforcement history at that power plant, the existing power plant. We have a air program, as you know, and they have all the jurisdiction on air permitting violations and setting permit limits. And if they don't respond to you, I would be happy to, send an email to them. And also, it's an environmental justice issue, and you've brought it up with Candace. So,
But they're supposed
you have
to be
legitimate
developing.
concerns about the past history. So you continue to work with the air program and the environmental justice program. And they're the ones that have the jurisdiction on it. I know it would need a Title V permit for the new facility, and that is subject to the environmental justice law, I believe, right? But
But they're working on they're supposed to be working on remediating the brownfield there. So it just doesn't seem like a very trustworthy company if they've already been issued so many violations. I know on the air, issues, but, they're supposed to be working on the brownfield, but how can we trust a company that already has a record of so many violations is what I mean.
yeah, I mean, we have licensed site remediation professionals, and they'll have to certify that the remediation was done appropriate for the land use. So, I trust William and his partners. I don't know the project and what the licensed site remediation professional is, who is retained for that project, but and we can, that's a question that the LSRP can answer. I don't know the local steering committee for that brownfield development area. Anthony Finley, that's the gentleman who had his knee fixed, he's the manager. So I can ask him to send you the steering committee list. And so I'm not familiar with the representation, but I can tell you we often have LSRPs, environmental groups, housing interests, many non-traditional partners on many of our brownfield development area steering committees. And the new application requires diverse steering committee representation. And there's points for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're
Look
welcome.
into that.
And this will be the last question because I know I've kept folks longer, and I apologize for the technical difficulties we had. Go ahead.
At the recent environmental justice,
You get to say your name again.
Paula Rogovin, again. At the recent environmental justice meeting of the DEP, opponents of the CPV gas plant were not allowed to speak after waiting 2 hours. Our voices were silenced. Will the BDA steering committee
Paula, we already referred this question to other people who will answer you. We referred this question already.
let me just
Rachel, I'll
ask
answer
it.
her question.
Yeah. Will the BDA steering committee take time to listen to the voices of the Woodbridge community that overwhelmingly opposes the new PVC gas power plant? Will the DEP schedule a new environmental justice meeting where thoughts and concerns about the CPV plant can be heard?
I can't speak to any future environmental justice meetings because that's not my area. What I can tell you is we want to hear all voices in the Brownfield Development Area Steering Committees. There's also requirement for a local redevelopment plan or designated area in need of redevelopment, or maybe even a redevelopment agreement. So there's some document that is local planning document that envisions the reuse there, right? And so sometimes we're also coming in a little late in the game where the local municipality has already established their intended land use. So, the BDA steering committee, all voices will be heard, but, again, local land use laws are local land use laws. We're a home rule state. So I would encourage you to work with the Woodbridge council, mayor, and I can't answer why or why not, in that meeting that you had, that your voices weren't heard. And I do want to apologize for the misunderstanding. I did not know, but I was told we weren't allowed to have recording equipment here when we reserved the room, so I had to find out. So I wanted to apologize to you for that. So I'm going to close the meeting. Rachel, do we know when the September meeting date is yet? We do not know, but it will be in September. So I guess we'll see you in September. Thank you, everybody, for your participation, especially to our speakers. Thank you so much, and our remote speakers. Rachel, do you have any final? Okay. Thank you so much.